Chapter 302. Starlight Grass is a planet-level divine item. The normal price should be around 5 to 8,000 per stock. If not for the fact that this alchemy master was in a hurry, the price wouldn't have been raised to such an extent. Not many people know about this. The person who spread the news happens to be from our human race and has a good relationship with me. He promised me that he would delay the release of the news by 3 days. Therefore, we only have 3 days to collect it. Once the 3 days are up, the Starlight Grassland will be filled with experts from various races. No one had any doubts about this. After all, such a simple task with no danger was what experts from any race liked. First of all, I have to say that there aren't any powerful beasts in the Starlight Grassland. There are only starlight bees. Although starlight bees aren't very powerful, starlight bees can't be underestimated. A starlight bee is comparable to a beginner stage martial artist. Perhaps this kind of strength is nothing to us, but these starlight bees appear in groups every time, and their numbers are never less than 100,000. Once they appear together, we won't be able to deal with them. Moreover, the starlight wasp's body contained a type of poison, although it was nothing special. Although it's not very strong, once it accumulates, it can still be fatal. Besides these, we don't have anything to worry about this time. What are your opinions? This time, should we accept this person and head there? After saying this, Zhou Yuan didn't say anything else. He quietly looked at the few people around him. Chaimo was his wife. She already knew about this news, and her opinion was the same as his. They definitely had to accept this mission. So now it was up to these few people to decide. Without thinking too much, the few of them nodded. After all, as long as they dealt with the starlight bees, this mission wouldn't be difficult at all. Seeing everyone's attitude, Zhou Yuan nodded lightly. Good, since everyone agrees, then there's no time to delay. In a while, we will head to the Starlight Grassland to collect starlight grass. But before we go, we still have to plan a little. Seeing that this mission wasn't difficult at all, Zhou Yuan still had a plan. Lu Feng finally understood why they hadn't encountered any danger in all these years. With such a cautious leader, it would be difficult for any problems to occur. First, we have to think about what might happen. Of course, the biggest and only problem this time was the siege of the starlight wasps. This point was actually easy to resolve. After all, if the number of starlight wasps is small, then it doesn't matter at all. But if there's a large number of them, then we need to be careful. Fortunately, Li Kong still has a top-grade spaceship. The spaceship had been modified by him. The attack of a beginner warrior couldn't hurt it at all. Therefore, once we see a large number of starlight bees appearing, we should make a prompt decision and directly enter the ship. Wait until the swarm recedes before coming out. Also, before we depart, we need to buy some antidotes. After all, the starlight wasp speed was incomparably fast. If he couldn't avoid it, he would be bitten. That's all I have planned. If you have anything to add, you can say it all together. After saying this, Zhou Yuan looked towards the surrounding crowd. However, they were all silent, as if pondering something. After a long while, they gently shook their heads, indicating that there were no more problems. Zhou Yuan stood up and said, "Since everyone has no more questions, then let's not delay and prepare to depart now. Li Kong, drive your spaceship out and wait at our usual place outside the city. Chawei, go and buy some antidotes. Remember to buy more. After all, this time we have Futu, a psychic, with us. As for the rest of us, we'll just wait for them outside the city." Lu Feng gently nodded, and the others did not have any objections. They all got up and left according to the division of labor. Lu Feng did not have anything to do. What he needed to do was to rush to the rendezvous point and wait. In everyone's opinion, Lu Feng should be the one who needed the most protection. After all, his identity was a psychic with a weak body. However, Lu Feng himself understood that this time, he was the one who was in the least danger. Not to mention his combat strength. Just the remaining 4 guardian crystals alone meant that no one here could harm him. Therefore, along the way, Lu Feng did not show any signs of nervousness. On the contrary, Li Kai, who was also going on a mission for the first time, was a little excited. Although he had the bloodline of a god and his combat strength was the highest among the group except for Lu Feng, as a young man of 22 or 23 years old, it was inevitable that he would be a little nervous on his first mission. Seeing the reaction of the two, Zhou Yuan's eyes flashed with a strange light. However, he did not say anything. Soon, the four of them arrived at the rendezvous point. In fact, there was nothing special about this place. It was just relatively empty. Not long after, Chao Wei also came. She had already bought a lot of antidotes in her backpack. According to her, even if there were 10 times more people, the amount would be enough. However, even if she was his wife, Zhou Yuan still checked again to make sure that there was nothing wrong with her before he finally felt relieved. 10 minutes later, a behemoth appeared in the sky. In the blink of an eye, it had landed on the open space. The moment he saw the spaceship, Lu Feng's eyes lit up. He knew about spaceships and could naturally see that this spaceship was not ordinary. The entire spaceship was a war machine. Lu Feng found that the person who modified the spaceship did not even bother to hide its appearance and directly completed the modification. At the outermost area, Lu Feng saw a majestic giant cannon. This kind of cannon was not available in the Federation. And the reason why Lu Feng knew about it was because it was too famous. This was the planet annihilation cannon produced by the Celestials. As the name implied, once the power was accumulated to the maximum level, with one shot, those quasi-life-bearing planets would be completely destroyed. This was a weapon that the Celestials had on their interstellar fortresses. Lu Feng really did not expect that someone would put on a spaceship. Although this spaceship was a top-grade spaceship, it was still far from being an interstellar fortress. Lu Feng wondered if such a spaceship would be completely scrapped after a single launch. Seeing Lu Feng's scrutinizing eyes, Li Kong, who had just walked down, lit up. He suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "You know?" Lu Feng did not try to be modest. He just nodded his head lightly. Although his understanding of mechanical technology could not be compared to those masters, it was already very terrifying for ordinary people. Before his transformation, Lu Feng had been most interested in these technological weapons. At that time, his IQ had been frighteningly high. Now, even if he was given a high-grade spaceship, he was confident that he could modify it into a war machine. Of course, at most, it would be a high-grade spaceship. Lu Feng still did not have the ability to do that. Seeing that Li Kong still wanted to ask something, Su Xiu, who was beside Lu Feng, stepped forward and said, "Li Kong, could it be that you have forgotten what Fuda's profession is?" Hearing this, everyone understood. Lu Feng was a psychic. 99% of psychics took the mechanical path. It could be said that psychics were the most knowledgeable about mechanical weapons among all the professions. However, after Su Xiu said this, he also realized something. He suddenly looked at Lu Feng and asked, "Futu, are you taking the mechanical path?" Lu Feng's age was 20 years old, but his level was a peak advanced psychic. With this kind of aptitude, he could almost be considered a genius of the Federation level. A genius of the Federation level was already an existence that was 1 in 10 million. Such an existence would normally walk the path of combat. After all, combat psychic masters were the path of true powerhouses. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded his head gently, then shook it. Everyone looked at Lu Feng and was slightly puzzled. However, Lu Feng quickly opened his mouth to explain. "Actually, it is very difficult for me to define. If I had my own ideas, I should be taking the mechanical path. However, there are still some small problems in the middle. I don't know the specifics. You will know in the future." These people were not willing to pry into other people's secrets. Since Lu Feng did not want to say, they did not ask anymore. Soon, the 6 of them boarded the spaceship and flew into the distance. Futu, Li Kang's top-grade spaceship, was sold for more than 40 million divine item points. In addition to the modifications, it almost emptied Li Kang's family fortune. However, it was worth the money. We have been in danger several times, and we have relied on this spaceship to escape. It was a distance of 10 billion miles from here to the Starlight Prairie. Such a distance was larger than the diameter of some small galaxies. If they only relied on the spaceship to fly, they would not be able to reach it in a few years. Therefore, not long after leaving, when they arrived at a stable point in space, Li Kong let the spaceship enter space-time travel. By using space-time travel, we can save a lot of time. However, even so, I'm afraid it will take us 3 hours to arrive. Therefore, during this period of time, everyone should prepare well. Once we arrive, we will start working immediately. Try to collect enough starlight grass in 3 days. After saying this, Zhou Yuan looked at Lu Feng and said, Futu, you are psychic. Your physical fitness is limited. If you feel tired, go back to the spaceship and rest. Don't force yourself. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded slightly. He was now a psychic. Although a psychic's body was stronger than an ordinary person's, it was far from comparable to a warrior's. These warriors could go 3 days and 3 nights without sleeping without any problem. However, a psychic could not. Therefore, Zhou Yuan considered Lu Feng's specific situation and said this. As for Lu Feng, he was not pretentious. After Zhou Yuan finished speaking, Li Kong, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. Futu, have you piloted a mecha before? Lu Feng was slightly taken aback, but he nodded slightly. He had piloted a mecha before, although that was when he was very young. However, when Lu Feng grew up, he had studied countless methods of piloting mechas. With his knowledge and his current level, Lu Feng could even try piloting an Earth-level mecha. After all, although he was a pinnacle advanced psychic, he could already materialize his mind. Moreover, his mind power was many times more terrifying than a psychic grandmaster's. Therefore, even if it was an Earth-level mecha that could only be piloted by a psychic grandmaster, Lu Feng would not have a problem. Chapter 303. Seeing Lu Feng nod, Li Kong also nodded slightly. Then, he hesitated for a moment and said, I have an advanced mecha here, but because it's been modified, its performance is comparable to many Earth-level mechas. It's quite difficult to pilot. I wonder if you want to try? Logically speaking, an advanced psychic couldn't pilot an Earth-level mecha. However, although his mecha was comparable to an Earth-level mecha, it was still an advanced mecha. And Lu Feng was a pinnacle advanced psychic, so he thought that Lu Feng might be able to give it a try. Hearing this, Lu Feng's eyes lit up. Although he had the Primordial Sutra and became the Emperor Lu Feng, in his heart, it had always been his dream to pilot a mecha and roam the sky. Now that he had the chance to try, Lu Feng naturally wouldn't refuse. In fact, he didn't need to hear Lu Feng's reply. Seeing Lu Feng's expression, Li Kong knew. He didn't say anything. He directly led Lu Feng to the storage room of the spaceship. An Earth-level mecha was priced between 1 billion and 10 billion Federation dollars. Although Li Kang's mecha was comparable to an Earth-level mecha, it still couldn't compare in many aspects. So the price was only a little more than 1 billion Federation dollars. In terms of God item points, it was only 100,000. 100,000 God item points was really nothing. Back then, Su Shuiyu had spent 10,000 God item points to treat Lu Feng to a bottle of sky green wine. So Li Kong really didn't care about 100,000. Soon, the two of them arrived at the storage room. In the top spaceships, there was an independent condensed space. This was a storage room made with space technology. It was similar to the independent space built by gods and psychic masters. It was just that in terms of size, it couldn't be compared at all. But even so, with such a condensed space, it was still very convenient for storage. Lu Feng didn't enter. Although Li Kong didn't care about this, Lu Feng had to avoid suspicion. After all, he and Li Kong weren't close. Soon, Li Kong came out. But this time, he was dragging a huge box in his hand. The entire box was as tall as 3 people. Placed here, it looked like a small house. Lu Feng knew that the mecha Li Kong was talking about was inside. Li Kong pointed at the square box and gestured. Lu Feng understood that she wanted him to check it himself. Lu Feng didn't hesitate and walked up to him. After he found the switch, he instantly opened the huge cabinet. Slowly, the entire box began to open completely. What appeared before Lu Feng was the advanced mecha that Li Kong had mentioned, which had the capabilities of an Earth-class mecha. His appearance was similar to that of an armed warrior, but he was over 4 meters tall. He carried 2 conventional high-grade cannons on his shoulders, and other than that, there were all kinds of small-sized energy cannons. Without a doubt, this was also modified. The person who modified it was undoubtedly a lunatic, and it might even be the same person who modified the spaceship. Such a mecha was completely a mobile turret. Lu Feng's eyes lit up, and he couldn't wait to try it out. Seeing Lu Feng like this, Li Kong laughed for the first time. Fudu, now is not the time. Wait until later, you'll have the chance to try it. We'll arrive in less than an hour. Now, try to establish a connection. See if you can really pilot it. After listening, Lu Feng nodded. Without hesitation, he directly entered. An hour passed quickly. As the entire spaceship trembled slightly, they arrived at the starlight grassland. The 5 of them walked out of the spaceship one by one. But the 5 of them didn't leave. Instead, they quietly looked in the direction of the exit. Soon, waves of tremors came. Not long after, a huge and burly figure slowly walked out of the exit. Seeing that it was like a real person walking, everyone's eyes lit up slightly. They knew that Lu Feng had completely controlled it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to coordinate it so well. Sure enough, Lu Feng's voice came from the metal mecha. I've already familiarized myself with all the functions of this mecha. Even the ultimate weapon can be used. So, you can rest assured about me. Hearing this, the 5 of them smiled faintly. In their eyes, Lu Feng's strength was the weakest. Since Lu Feng had complete control of this mecha, everyone was relieved. After all, the power of an Earth-level mecha was not much weaker than an evolution stage martial artist. And the power of this mecha was probably between a warrior and a warrior. There wasn't much danger here, so this was enough. Okay, let's start. I've already sent the appearance of the starlight grass to your identity card. After you see it, you can directly harvest it. There's nothing to pay attention to about the starlight grass, so after you see it, you can directly harvest it. Everyone nodded their heads and began to spread out to harvest the fruits. Lu Feng didn't stay in the same place, but chose to fly in a direction. After turning on the detection system, everything below could be seen at a glance. After comparing the technology, Lu Feng could easily find the starlight grass hidden below without using his own eyes. After flying for less than 10 minutes, Lu Feng stopped. Because he had found the starlight grass, he directly landed on the ground. Lu Feng operated the mecha and began to harvest it. My luck this time is not bad. It's actually a small cluster of starlight grass. If I have this kind of luck in the future, I'm afraid my speed will increase by a lot. Most of the starlight grass grew independently. However, it wasn't absolute. Sometimes a lot of starlight grass gathered together, and this was the starlight grass cluster. The starlight grass that Lu Feng discovered had more than 100 starlight grasses in it. This was undoubtedly a lot. After spending a minute, Lu Feng had already finished harvesting all of them. At this time, there were 119 stalks of starlight grass in his mecha's backpack. Lu Feng was very satisfied with this harvest. He didn't stop and continued to fly into the distance. He didn't know if it was because Lu Feng chose the right route, or if Lu Feng's luck was really that good. In 6 hours of the afternoon, he had already found 8 clusters of starlight grass. In addition to the scattered starlight grass, Lu Feng alone had already obtained more than 900 stalks of starlight grass. Seeing that night was gradually approaching, Lu Feng decisively gave up the idea of continuing to search. This was because Zhou Yuan once said that starlight bees would appear in groups at night. Therefore, for safety's sake, they all agreed to return to the spaceship at night. They flew all the way back, and by this time, the sky was gradually darkening. The alternation between day and night in the outer region battlefield was also a characteristic. Here, there was no light source, but there was a clear distinction between day and night. And the reason was that this place was filled with a strange law. It seemed that in the past, someone had made this place into a real world, causing the alternation between day and night. Of course, this was a secret of the outer region battlefield. Lu Feng still didn't know. When Lu Feng returned, the other 5 people had already returned to the spaceship. Seeing Lu Feng's arrival, they all surrounded him. How did it feel to be out for the first time, Brother Fudo? The first to speak was still Su Shuiyu. Here, He was the one who came into contact with Lu Feng the earliest, and also the one who had the best relationship with him. After getting off the spaceship, Lu Feng had a satisfied smile on his face. It was okay, Brother Su. After all, there wasn't any danger. I was just searching, so I didn't feel anything wrong. Hearing this, Su Shuyu nodded in relief. He then asked, Brother, how was your harvest? This was just a casual question. After all, these people didn't really think that Lu Feng would really have a huge harvest. In their eyes, Lu Feng being able to obtain a few dozen stalks was already pretty good. Lu Feng naturally understood everyone's expression. He just smiled mysteriously, then went to the back of the mecha and opened the storage compartment. The moment they saw the densely packed starlight grass, everyone was stunned for a moment, and then a look of shock appeared on their faces. So many. I say, Fu Tu, did you find a large starlight grass? Otherwise, how could there be so many? Lu Feng shrugged slightly and said, There isn't any large starlight grass, but there are a few small ones. Zhou Yuan looked at the large amount of starlight grass and revealed a strange expression. In the beginning, he brought Lu Feng here because of Su Shuyu's face, but he didn't expect that Lu Feng would be so useful. After a little estimation, Zhou Yuan knew the approximate number of starlight grass here. More than 900 stalks of starlight grass. Futu, your harvest alone is more than all of us combined. It seems that bringing you here was really the right choice. After saying this, Zhou Yuan smiled happily. Lu Feng brought more than 900 stalks, and the 5 of them added up to more than 700 stalks. This was a total of more than 1,600 stalks, close to 1,700 stalks. And this number meant that their harvest today was a total of 17 million God item points. Among all of their missions and rewards, such a huge reward could be counted on one's fingers. Seeing the happy expressions on their faces, Lu Feng also felt happy in his heart. For him, this was really nothing. After all, as long as he returned to the Federation. With the accumulation and help of the Lu family and the Federal University, resources were not a problem at all. Even if he entered the time realm to cultivate every day, there would be no problem. Therefore, Lu Feng didn't care much about these things. Okay, today's harvest is really good. Let's have a good rest. We'll continue tomorrow. Chapter 304. The night passed quickly. The next day, the spaceship followed the direction that Lu Feng left the day before and traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers. When the spaceship landed, the group did not say much. They all split up and began their own search. On the first day, it was already afternoon when they arrived. Therefore, they only had a few hours to search. However, it was different this time. They had a day to search. When dusk fell, the group gathered again. This time, it was Lu Feng who surprised them. The 5 of them had a lot more harvest than the first day. They had a total of 2,000 stalks. However, they had a lot, but Lu Feng had even more. Lu Feng had brought a total of 3,000 stalks of starlight grass. When they saw Lu Feng open the storage box, they were completely shocked. Up until now, we've found more than 7,700 stalks. That was already more than 77 million divine item points. Terrifying, this is really terrifying. Even without the purchase of that alchemy master, we can rely on this to make a fortune in the future. Tea Powder's eyes glowed slightly as he spoke with excitement. However, after hearing this, Zhou Yuan smiled and shook his head. Although starlight grass is a planet-level god item and its price is about 5,000, its real use is not that great. Even if the trading center is willing to buy such a planet-level god item, the price will be very, very low. Moreover, if Futu did not come with us, our harvest would not be so huge. Moreover, there's only so much starlight grass in the starlight grassland. I'm afraid that after our harvest this time, there will not be much left in the near future. So, don't think about it in the future. Tea Powder shrugged slightly. She knew all this. What she said just now was just a casual remark. Tomorrow is the last day. From the day after tomorrow, the news will be officially announced. At that time, there will be a lot of experts from various clans coming here. Therefore, We have to make the best use of this remaining time. After all, we can't meet them. Otherwise, we might be robbed by them. Everyone nodded lightly and went to recuperate. The third day came quickly. This time, the direction chosen by the spaceship was the same place Lu Feng had been searching for. In their eyes, Lu Feng was a lucky star. The direction he chose was the direction of luck. And that was indeed the case. By noon, Lu Feng's harvest had already surpassed yesterday's. He had collected more than 2,300 starlight grass. According to Lu Feng's calculations, he might even have a chance to break through 5,000 by the time he returned in the afternoon. This was undoubtedly very frightening. However, just as Lu Feng started collecting 3,000 plants in the afternoon, his identification card suddenly vibrated. Lu Feng knew that someone was contacting him. The only ones who could contact him were the other 5. He stopped collecting, picked up the ID card, and opened the call request. Before Lu Feng could say anything, an urgent voice came from the card. "Fuda, where are you? Come back quickly. We found a large number of starlight bees. Big Brother Su was attacked by starlight bees and was poisoned. I have saved Big Brother Su and am on the way back. You should come back quickly. Don't get entangled by those crazy starlight bees." Hearing this, Lu Feng was slightly stunned. Then, his expression changed greatly. If it were someone else who was seriously injured, he might not be so anxious. But the one who was injured was Su Shuiyu. Among the people Lu Feng knew, there was no doubt that Su Shuiyu's importance in his heart was incomparable. After all, when it had just arrived, it was Su Shuiyu who had received him. Su Shuiyu was also the reason why he could join this team. Therefore, after hearing that Su Shuiyu was seriously injured and poisoned, Lu Feng did not hesitate and directly flew in the direction of the spaceship. Lu Feng also wanted to give up on this mecha. Unfortunately, if he gave up, he would not have the position navigation. When they left, they did not give Lu Feng a map. Therefore, no matter how slow the mecha was, Lu Feng could not leave it. Lu Feng could only fly anxiously, looking at the surroundings of the spaceship and the starlight bees that covered the sky. A shocked expression appeared in his eyes. The number of starlight bees gathered here was definitely not 100,000. This was at least a few million or even tens of millions. A swarm of 100,000 starlight bees was enough to threaten the safety of everyone except Lu Feng. And with tens of millions of starlight bees, even if he was at his most powerful state, he would still have to flee. Lu Feng did not know why there were so many starlight bees gathered here, but he did not have the mood to think about it. He directly contacted Zhou Yuan and asked Zhou Yuan to open the cabin door. Lu Feng instantly flew into the spaceship. The moment Lu Feng entered, thousands of starlight bees flew in together. However, the moment the cabin closed, Zhou Yuan and the other venerables attacked with all their strength and killed more than half of the starlight bees. The remaining starlight bees were also killed by them one by one. After opening the mecha's defense, Lu Feng jumped down. He ran directly to Zhou Yuan and asked anxiously, "Big Brother Zhou, how is Big Brother Su? What happened? How could he be seriously injured and even poisoned?" Zhou Yuan did not say anything. Instead, he turned around with a gloomy face and ran directly to the center with Lu Feng. Looking at the tan Su Shuiyu in front of him, Lu Feng's eyes were also distorted. He only knew that this was a symptom of being poisoned. Turning around, Lu Feng looked at the people around him and roared, "Don't you have the antidote? Why didn't you use it? Didn't it work?" At this moment, no one blamed Lu Feng for his rudeness. They just nodded sadly. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng was slightly stunned. Seeing Lu Feng like this, Su Shuiyu, who was lying on the chair, tried his best to show an ugly smile. "Brother Futu, you can't blame them. After all, no one would have thought this would happen. To be honest, I can only blame myself for being too unlucky. Originally, I saw a super large starlight grass with tens of thousands of starlight bees. At that time, I was blinded by the shocking wealth and even forgot about the existence of the starlight bees. I directly started to collect them. I just didn't expect that there would be a starlight bee king hidden in this starlight grass. Its speed was extremely fast. Although I easily killed it, I was also poisoned by the Starlight Bee King. Starlight Bee King. Hearing these words, Lu Feng's face turned gloomy. Generally speaking, one Starlight Bee King would be born in 100,000 Starlight Bees. That much was certain. But this Starlight Bee King was different. The probability of Starlight Bee King appearing was too low. Even if there were hundreds of millions of Starlight Bees, there might not even be one. But who would have thought that Su Xiuyu would encounter one? A few minutes later, Su Xiuyu had already fallen unconscious. He was holding on because he was worried about Lu Feng. After seeing that Lu Feng was also safe, he finally couldn't withstand the invasion of the poison and fell unconscious. What do we do now? What do we do? Li Kai was already at a loss. Although he didn't have much contact with Su Xiuyu, he still respected this big brother who had taken care of him. Moreover, Su Xiuyu's relationship with his father was very deep. Back when his father was training here, he had received a lot of help from Su Xiuyu. Therefore, he was very flustered and didn't know what to do. Hearing Li Kai's words, everyone fell silent, because they didn't have a solution. After a long time, Zhou Yuan slowly sighed. Ordinary Starlight Bee venom can be treated with these antidotes. Even if it's a Starlight Bee King, the most we can do is double the amount. I asked Cha and Mo to buy 10 times the amount because I was afraid of encountering the Starlight Queen Bee. But I didn't expect that I would miscalculate this time. The Starlight Queen Bee's venom was extremely strong and could even be said to be mutated. Even if the dosage of these antidotes was large, they would have no effect. Moreover, the speed at which the venom acted up was very terrifying. Even if they wanted to return to the 37th city, it was already too late. Li Kai slammed his fist on the table. Suddenly, the steel table was smashed to pieces. But at this moment, no one blamed Li Kai because they were also angry and sad. Don't tell me there's really no other way. Looking at Su Xiuyu's body gradually rotting, Lu Feng still didn't give up and asked. He really couldn't ignore this big brother Shui who had treated him so well and let him die so sadly. Hearing this, Zhou Yuan hesitated for a moment, but still let out a long sigh. There are two ways to deal with this poison. The first is to find a god expert. As long as there is divine power, this poison is really nothing. But where are we going to find a god? The first way is to detoxify the poison. But this is the Starlight Queen Bee's venom. Ordinary antidotes won't work at all, so Zhou Yuan didn't say anything, and everyone knew what he meant. Silence, incomparable silence. Suddenly, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly stood up and asked with some excitement, "Big Brother Zhou, are the Starlight Queen Bee and the Starlight Grass companion creatures?" Companion creatures referred to living creatures that existed together with each other. Generally, as long as one appeared, the other would inevitably appear. From the name, it wasn't difficult for Lu Feng to see that these two creatures must be related. It was very likely that they were companion creatures. Zhou Yuan didn't know why Lu Feng was so excited. However, he still nodded his head gently. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng became even more excited. Companion creatures generally promote each other. But at the same time, although they rely on each other, they also restrain each other. Then this Starlight Grass must be able to restrain the Starlight Queen Bee's venom. This knowledge was something that Lu Feng had learned a long time ago, and now he finally remembered. But when he heard this, Zhou Yuan's eyes dimmed once again. The Starlight Grass does contain detoxification ingredients, but that ingredient can't be directly absorbed. It needs to be refined to obtain it. That's right, enough Starlight Grass essence can detoxify the venom. But he didn't continue, because to refine the essence, some technological equipment was needed. And whether it was a warrior or a psychic master, without the help of equipment, it was impossible. Everyone fell silent again. They quietly looked at Su Xiuyu, their eyes flickering with sorrow. After all, such a big brother was about to die in front of them. This was something that no one could accept. However, Lu Feng was not one of them. Watching Su Xiuyu's aura become thinner and thinner, Lu Feng took a deep breath. Although he, Lu Feng, wasn't a great sage, he would never forget those who had helped him. Thus, Lu Feng decided to reveal some things. He looked at everyone and said with unusual determination, "Yes, to refine the essence, it can't be done without equipment. However, there were exceptions to this rule. There's a type of person who can do it. That is an alchemist." Chapter 305. Those who could refine elixirs were alchemists. The biggest characteristic of alchemists was that they could refine the essence of all divine items into the energy they needed to refine elixirs. However, these words did not make these people excited. Lu Feng, you should know the status of an alchemist. Those who can refine the essence of the starlight grass are at least 3rd grade and above. As for 3rd grade alchemists, I'm afraid it's more difficult than finding a god. The number of alchemists was extremely small. After all, only those who could refine 3rd grade mid-grade elixirs could be called alchemists. In the Federation, the number of alchemists who were 3rd grade and above would not exceed 200. Even in the extraterritorial battlefield, although there might be more of them, it was still extremely difficult to find one. At least, it would not be easier than finding a god. Looking at the sad and disappointed faces of the crowd, Lu Feng smiled slightly. At this moment, a feeling of confidence arose spontaneously. Although I haven't taken a test, I can be sure that I am an alchemist. In an instant, everyone was stunned. They looked at Lu Feng as if they had not heard anything. What did you say? You said you're an alchemist? An alchemist? Chamo's tone had changed slightly. The status of an alchemist was too terrifying. Moreover, the existence of an alchemist was too rare. It could be said that they had seen many gods. After all, in the extraterritorial battlefield, gods would occasionally appear. However, until now, they had only seen one alchemist. That was a 4th-tier alchemist, and they were only able to catch a glimpse of him from afar. It could be said that an alchemist was not inferior to a true god to these martial artists in the upheaval period. Looking at the shocked faces of the crowd, Lu Feng nodded deeply. He knew that if he were to be certified, he would definitely be a 4th-grade alchemist. After all, he had successfully refined a peak 4th-grade mid-grade elixir. But don't alchemists have to be at least a great Psyche Master? You're only an advanced Psyche Master now. Although you are at the peak, you are still an advanced Psyche Master. Chaemo seemed to have thought of something and asked. Lu Feng didn't hide anything. One of the keys to becoming an alchemist is to materialize one's mental strength. Although I'm only a pinnacle advanced Psyche Master, for some reason, I'm able to materialize my mind power. So, I became an alchemist. All right, Elder Brother Su's situation is not optimistic. I will first refine the necessary antidote to detoxify him. As for the other matters, we will talk about them later. At this moment, everyone reacted. Just now, they were stunned by Lu Feng's identity as an alchemist, so they temporarily forgot everything. Now that they heard Lu Feng's words, they remembered that they had more important things to do. Zhou Yuan immediately moved. He took out a large amount of starlight grass from the storage cabinet behind Lu Feng's mecha and placed it in front of him. Looking at the starlight grass in front of him, Lu Feng did not hesitate. He immediately connected to the god's domain and began to materialize his mental power. This time, it was not alchemy. Moreover, the starlight grass was a planet-level divine item. Although it was a grade 4 divine item, it was nothing to Lu Feng Lai. After all, he could already refine grade 4 pills. It was much simpler to just extract the essence. In an instant, Lu Feng entered the state. His mental power constantly invaded the starlight grass in front of him, which was held up by his mental power, and began the rapid transformation process. According to the universe, Lu Feng's mental power was a mutated mental power. It could be compatible with any divine item. That was why he could become an alchemist. However, Lu Feng understood that everything was not like that. The reason why he could do all this was because Lu Feng's mental power was actually that strange power. This strange power was truly incomparably strange. Not only could it increase Lu Feng's combat strength in all aspects, it could even concoct medicinal pills. This was undoubtedly very unimaginable. The moment his mental power entered the starlight grass, Lu Feng began the slow process of inscribing the runes. In the surrounding space, an inexplicable power was absorbed and condensed by the runes on the starlight grass. Soon, the entire stalk of starlight grass began to change slowly. The originally solid starlight grass gradually turned into a liquid state as the power was absorbed. Then, countless different colored liquids began to peel off. Finally, a dark green essence was left. The moment they saw this essence, everyone's mind shook violently. They knew that this was the essence of the starlight grass. It was also the substance that could detoxify the poison. He really is an alchemist. He really succeeded. Big Brother Sue can be saved. That's great. Women were undoubtedly the most emotional creatures. Even female martial artists who had the strength of the upheaval period were the same. She shouted in surprise, and the excitement on her face could not be concealed. As for the people around her, although they weren't as crazy as her, the excitement on their faces was still obvious. After extracting the essence of a stalk of starlight grass, Lu Feng did not stop. Instead, he continuously used his mental power to extract more than 10 stalks of starlight grass and refine them all at once. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked once again. However, after witnessing Lu Feng's success, they already had an inexplicable sense of trust in Lu Feng. Therefore, when they saw that Lu Feng wanted to extract 10 stalks of starlight grass at once, although they were shocked, they did not doubt him. After a few minutes, 10 clusters of starlight grass essence quietly floated in the air. Then, Lu Feng used his mental power to combine them, connecting them to the previous clusters of essence. Lu Feng slowly injected the merged starlight grass essence into Su Xiuyu's body. The moment the starlight grass essence entered Su Xiuyu's body, everyone could clearly see that the dark color on Su Xiuyu's body began to weaken slightly. The speed of decay also slowed down. Everyone knew that this essence really had the effect of detoxifying the poison. Without a doubt, this was very exciting. Continue, Lu Feng. This is still not enough. About 134 stalks of starlight grass essence will be needed to completely remove the poison. Zhou Yuan held a device in his hand and looked at the numbers on it as he spoke to Lu Feng. After hearing this, Lu Feng nodded firmly. In the next moment, another 10 stalks of starlight grass flew out and were completely refined by Lu Feng into essence. For the next half an hour, Lu Feng was in the process of refining. Without a doubt, this kind of consumption was abnormally terrifying. After all, he had not yet reached the advanced stage of the primordial scripture's soul fusion stage. The amount of mental power he could use was limited. Of course, if he entered the advanced stage and could fuse the primordial scripture with his soul body, then it would be a different situation. At that time, Lu Feng would truly transform, a terrifying change that could turn the world upside down. If he could really reach that step, then he would have almost unlimited mental power. The starlight grass essence that he needed had all been extracted. Lu Feng injected all of them into Su Xiuyu's body. Finally, the black color of death gradually disappeared, and the state of Su Xiuyu's body began to stop rotting. For a warrior, the body was already incomparably terrifying. Ordinary small injuries could be easily healed. For a warrior in the upheaval stage, his vitality was even more astonishing. The speed at which his body's cells divided had reached an unimaginable level. It cannot be said that he could completely recover in an instant. However, this kind of recovery speed was thousands of times faster than an ordinary person's. After doing all this, the few of them finally let out a long sigh of relief. At this time, they could finally calm down. Lu Feng lay on the chair, his whole body soaked in sweat. This kind of intense consumption did not deplete the slightest bit of his physical strength. However, the amount of mental power consumed was incomparably terrifying. This made Lu Feng unable to support himself, and in the end, he could only lie paralyzed on the chair. The few of them were completely silent. They quietly looked at Lu Feng, but there was an incomparably complicated look in their eyes. These people did not have a direct impression of Lu Feng. After all, They had only known each other for a short time. The main reason they were able to accept Lu Feng, a person with an unknown identity, was mainly because of Su Xiuyu's introduction. Moreover, Lu Feng was really too young. Everyone did not think that he would have any powerful strength. Since that was the case, these people naturally had nothing to worry about. However, they did not expect that such a useless person would have such an illustrious identity. An alchemist. Compared to an alchemist, a genius at the Federation level was nothing at all. If they really had to say, such a young grade 3 alchemist was definitely a demon-level existence. In fact, he was one of the strongest, peerless demon-level existences. At this moment, everyone had already understood that the name Futu was definitely an alias. This Futu definitely had a very high status in the Federation. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to become an alchemist. After a deep sigh, Zhou Yuan finally spoke. Futu, I know that you're hiding your identity. We won't force you to say this. We just want to confirm that you really don't have any ill intentions towards us. Needless to say, everyone already knew that Lu Feng was not targeting them. After all, such a young grade 3 alchemist, even if he had any ill intentions towards them, he would definitely not put himself in danger. After all, alchemists were often very, very weak. After a long period of recovery, coupled with the abnormal power of the origin scripture, Lu Feng had almost recovered. When he heard Zhou Yuan's words, he did not show the slightest trace of anger. She nodded her head gently, but solemnly. Actually, I believe that brother Su has already told you how I came here. This is true, and I didn't hide in the slightest. This foreign battlefield is a place that I will definitely set foot in, but definitely not now. If it wasn't for a coincidence that I entered the space-time transfer array, I definitely wouldn't have come here now. As for you, I really don't have any ill intentions towards you. Moreover, do you think that you have anything worth coveting? Lu Feng's last sentence was a little harsh, but no one could deny it. After all, with Lu Feng's current status as a grade 3 alchemist, any faction would treat him as an important guest and provide him with unlimited resources for his cultivation. A grade 3 alchemist, and such a young one at that, represented unlimited potential. If Futu could one day reach the level of a grade 8 or even grade 9 alchemist grandmaster and be able to refine pinnacle legendary pills or divine pills, the billions of races in the universe would most likely yearn for him. At that time, even the Divine King would not dare to put on airs in front of him. Lu Feng definitely had the right to say anything. Chapter 306. Seeing that everyone was silent, Lu Feng smiled and said, Actually, you don't have to worry. My main goal was to return to the human race. After all, there's still a big gap between my strength and the experience here. On this point, everyone agreed with him. Those famous alchemists, which one of them didn't have countless powerhouses surrounding them? Even deities were willing to protect them. Although Lu Feng was only a third-grade alchemist, it was reasonable for him to have a few warriors at the peak of the perfect stage, or even a demigod to protect him. After all, his potential was too terrifying. Well, as long as you don't have any evil intentions, then welcome. Zhou Yuan stretched out his hand, and this time, Lu Feng could see the recognition in the depths of his eyes. He knew that Zhou Yuan had really acknowledged him. At this moment, Lu Feng also stretched out his arm, and the two shook hands directly. Perhaps Lu Feng's strength was still very weak, but his identity as an alchemist was enough to be on equal footing with anyone. Therefore, Zhou Yuan did not have the same look of scrutiny as before. Su Xiuyu's injuries were too serious, although the poison had been dispelled, but he would not be able to recover in a short time. He had fallen into a coma. Of course, this was not a dangerous thing, and it did not mean that he could not wake up, because this was a natural reaction of the body. This was the body's natural protective instinctive reaction after being seriously injured. According to the speculation, if Su Xiuyu wanted to wake up, he would have to wait for his body to completely repair itself before he could be awakened. And according to this speed, Su Xiuyu would not be able to fully recover in less than a month. The spaceship had taken off and was flying in the direction of the 37th city. On the spaceship, everyone had already begun to count their harvest. although Su Shuyu had been seriously injured this time. But the return he had obtained was indeed amazing. Just the starlight grass collected in that short time was almost close to 10,000. In addition to what these people had obtained a while ago, as well as what Lu Feng had obtained, the number of starlight grass they had harvested this time had exceeded the 20,000 mark. This was undoubtedly a terrifying number. 20,000 starlight grass represented 200 million divine item points. Such a figure was already the sum of all their family assets. Looking at the starlight grass, everyone's enthusiasm soared. Now it was time to reap the rewards. At this time, it was time to discuss the issue of distribution. According to the previous rules, it should be evenly distributed. But this time, there were too many accidents. And this time, the ratio of everyone's contribution was far different. Without a doubt, most of them were the unconscious Su Shuyu. Of the 20,000 starlight grasses, half of them were obtained by him. Among the remaining 10,000, Lu Feng was the one who obtained the most. He occupied 60% of the total number. It could be said that Lu Feng and Su Shuyu occupied more than 80% of them. The other four only had a little more than 20%. If they wanted to divide it equally, they would be too embarrassed to take it. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Yuan finally spoke. This time, Big Brother Su and Lu Feng got the most, so they should get the most. You don't have any objections, right? Lu Feng didn't care about these things at all, so he didn't have any objections to the equal distribution. The others were the same. After all, they had been together for decades. Naturally, they would be too embarrassed to ask for more. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan nodded in satisfaction and continued. Li Kong sent the spaceship, which was helpful. Although the others didn't get much, they also worked hard. So this time, Big Brother Su and Fudu will take 80% of them. Their ratio will be divided according to the starlight grass they got. As for me, Tea Powder, Li Kong, and Li Kai, the remaining 20% will be divided equally. Is this okay? Tea Powder nodded. Li Kong nodded without hesitation. After a slight hesitation, Li Kai nodded in agreement. Okay, since everyone agrees, then we will wait for a month after the official delivery and distribute the divine item points according to this ratio. Zhou Yuan had already made the final decision. But at this time, Lu Feng spoke. Big Brother Zhou, wait a moment. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Lu Feng. This time, Lu Feng should be able to get 30%, which was 60 million divine item points. However, everyone knew that this was not something that Lu Feng should have. After all, he saved Su Shuiyu's life. In this case, it was only right for him to get a little more. And when everyone saw Lu Feng speak, they also thought that Lu Feng wanted to get a little more. Seeing everyone's expression, Lu Feng could guess what they were thinking. With a faint smile, Lu Feng slowly opened his mouth and said, "This kind of allocation is actually not very reasonable." Hearing this, everyone showed an expression that said, "I knew it." And after a moment of silence, Zhou Yuan asked, "Then how do you plan to distribute Futu?" There was a hint of strange emotion in his voice, but Lu Feng didn't seem to hear it. He smiled and said, "Big Brother Su Shuyu got 10,000 starlight grass, so there's no doubt that he will get 50%. As for me, I don't need so much." Everyone was slightly stunned. Lu Feng didn't stop and continued. "I was able to come here this time because of the help of my brothers and sisters. I just looked for it and didn't contribute anything else. Instead, Big Brother Li Kong gave me a mecha. If it wasn't for its help, I wouldn't have been able to go so smoothly. So, I'll change my share a little. How about this? The remaining 50% will be divided equally among the 5 of us." Everyone was completely silent. This change of Lu Feng's was simply too great of a loss. From 30% to 10%, it seemed like a loss of 20%. But it was a loss of 40 million divine item points. 40 million divine item points. If they hadn't been lucky and had a high success rate, their combined wealth would have been the same. And many perfect stage martial artists might not be able to gather 40 million divine item points in their lifetime. But Lu Feng gave it away so easily. This was really too much. However, Lu Feng could ignore such a huge amount of wealth, but they couldn't. So, in the end, they didn't decline and settled on it. It had been 7 days since they returned to city number 30. During these 7 days, Lu Feng had been quietly cultivating. Of course, he didn't cultivate as a warrior. This was because he had already reached the limit of this realm. If he wanted to improve, he would need a certain amount of opportunity. During these 7 days, Lu Feng had been quietly cultivating the Origin Sutra in his sea of consciousness. Lu Feng already knew that alchemists weren't as mysterious in this foreign battleground as they were in the Federation. However, there wasn't any difference in status. Now, he was eager to improve his level. That way, he would be able to continuously refine Grade 4 or even Grade 5 elixirs. A Grade 5 elixir was considered a high-level elixir. The price of a high-level elixir would cost billions of Federation dollars. In the foreign battleground, the price would be several times higher. Any Grade 5 elixir, even if it was of inferior quality, would cost at least 500,000 divine item points. A legendary Grade 5 elixir would cost more than 10 million divine item points. I have the alchemy scripture and have spent countless hours comprehending the contents. If I refine it normally, as long as I succeed, I will refine at least a perfect grade elixir. A perfect Grade 5 elixir costs at least 1 million divine item points and up to 10 million divine item points. With the help of the Origin Sutra, my refining speed will be extremely fast. Once I can use the strange power of the Origin Sutra without limit, my wealth will be really shocking. Therefore, the most important thing for me now is to quickly enter the Origin Sutra's large success stage. Only then will I have the possibility of refining high-level elixirs. After a moment of silence, Lu Feng started to calculate how long it would take for him to enter the large success stage. After some calculations, a helpless look appeared on his face. Based on the speed of the fusion, I will need at least 9 months. Even if I enter the Origin Sutra's Origin Sutra every day to cultivate, I will still need at least 6 months. This time is too long. To other people, becoming a telekinesis grandmaster from a high-level telekinesis master in 9 months was undoubtedly an astonishing speed. However, to Lu Fenglai, who was used to rapid improvements, this speed was really too slow. Forget it. I will wait 20 days and hand over the starlight grass. Then, I will receive 20 million divine item points. These 20 million divine item points are enough for me to cultivate in the Time Sutra's 6-fold acceleration for a month. This means that I can enter the large success stage. Cultivating in the Time Sutra's 6-fold acceleration for a month required 16 million divine item points. Lu Feng happened to have 20 million divine item points. After using them for a month, he would still have 4 million divine item points left. These 4 million divine item points were enough for him to buy some divine item points to refine elixirs and raise his telekinesis master level to the peak of a telekinesis grandmaster level. Lu Feng's realm was actually very strange. This was because once he became a telekinesis grandmaster and cultivated to the large success stage of the soul fusion realm, his mind power could be said to be unlimited. Logically speaking, such unlimited mind power should directly make him a peak telekinesis grandmaster. However, this was not the case in reality. This was because the power in the Origin Sutra's Origin Sutra was the power that Lu Feng could use, but it was not the power that he cultivated. Although he could use it indefinitely, it did not represent Lu Feng's realm. It could be said that the mind power of Lu Feng, who was a peak telekinesis grandmaster, and Lu Feng, who was a beginner telekinesis grandmaster, was 10 times different. However, the mind power that Lu Feng could use was the same, which was unlimited. In order to continue cultivating in the next realm, Lu Feng had to raise his level to the peak of a telekinesis grandmaster level. Chapter 307. If that's the case, I won't bother myself for the next few days. I'll use this time to study the contents of the pill scripture. Although time was tight, as long as the bounty was given, it would be fine. Even if he cultivated for the next few days, he wouldn't be able to improve much. Therefore, Lu Feng gave up on the idea of continuing to cultivate and started to study the pill scripture instead. Another 20 days passed by quickly. On this day, Lu Feng didn't continue to cultivate, as Su Shuyu had already woken up. Hearing that hearty laughter and seeing those familiar movements, Lu Feng was really happy. He was very happy. To be honest, he didn't have many friends in the Federation. Li Yongheng, who had returned to his family to cultivate, was one, while Su Wanxiao and Qi Yunqing, who were in the dormitory, were two. Aside from these people, he really didn't have many close friends. Moreover, with the appearance of the Mu family, he would become the #1 person in the entire Federation. Lu Feng could imagine that his limelight would be so great that he would overshadow the 7 sovereigns of the younger generation. He, who stood at the peak, wouldn't have any friends to speak of. Therefore, Lu Feng especially cherished everything here. After seeing that Su Shuyu had woken up, Lu Feng felt happy from the bottom of his heart. Futu, I didn't expect you to hide so deeply. An alchemy master is such a noble status. I'm afraid that you're definitely not an ordinary person in the Federation. To be able to become an alchemy master, one must have a strong background. Otherwise, how could one have access to those ancient books and pill formulas for refining pills? Generally, those second-rate families wouldn't be able to have these things. Therefore, in Su Shuyu's mind, Lu Feng must be a child of a first-rate family. However, he couldn't guess which family Lu Feng came from. After all, the name Futu was definitely an alias. Hearing Su Shuyu's praise, Lu Feng smiled slightly, but he still didn't reveal his identity. Big brother Su, I won't hide it from you. My name really isn't Futu, it's just a name I randomly came up with. As for my true identity, it's really inconvenient for me to reveal it. After all, it involves too much. However, you will know one day. Moreover, this day won't be too far away. Looking at Lu Feng's confident eyes, Su Shuyu didn't ask anything else. However, in his heart, he was still somewhat disapproving. After all, it was a bit exaggerated for a person's identity to have so many implications. Brother Futu, since that's the case, I won't ask anymore. I just hope that when you become successful one day, you won't forget about me. Lu Feng smiled and nodded. Lu Feng would never forget those who held grudges against him. Lu Feng would always remember those who had helped him. By the way, Big Brother Su, we'll be leaving tomorrow to deliver the goods. I think you're almost there. Do you want to come along? Since Su Shuyu was able to wake up from his self-isolation, there was no longer any problem with his body. He was just a little weak now. After all, the Starlight King Bee's poison was still very exaggerated. After hesitating for a moment, Su Shuyu finally shook his head. I won't go first. The damage this time is still not small. I'll take this time to recuperate. When you come back, we'll have a good gathering. Lu Feng nodded gently and didn't say anything else. Early the next morning, Lu Feng's identity card sent a call request. He knew that this was Zhou Yuan informing him that he was about to leave. Coming out of Su Shuyu's villa, Lu Feng walked directly to the transaction center. This was the place they agreed to meet. When Lu Feng arrived, Zhou Yuan and the others were already waiting for Lu Feng. Seeing Lu Feng walking over, these people smiled and greeted him. Although Lu Feng's strength was nothing in their eyes, who told Lu Feng to have another identity as an alchemist. An 18-year-old alchemist, this was something that even a god couldn't compare to. They weren't so humble, but they also didn't have the casual look they used to have. Sitting next to Zhou Yuan, Lu Feng responded with a smile. At this time, seeing that everyone had arrived, Zhou Yuan said, "Since everyone is here, let's go. Then let's set off early. The earlier we get the money, the earlier we can feel at ease." Everyone had no objection and followed Zhou Yuan directly to Li Kang's spaceship docked at the warehouse. Qinglan City is the central city of the Qinglan region and is also the largest and most prosperous city in this region. This time, the mission was issued from there. On the spaceship, the few people didn't look relaxed. Although this was a trip to complete a mission, the degree of danger still existed. Lu Feng also knew this. Before leaving yesterday, Su Shuyu told Lu Feng that in this foreign battlefield, the city was relatively safe, but once out of the city, anything could happen. The one thing that was not lacking in here was killing. So no matter where they went, they had to pay attention to everything around them. The distance between Qinglan City and the 37th city was hundreds of times farther than the starlight grassland they had been to before. Even if they used space-time travel, it would take 4 or 5 days to arrive. After all, there were many places that couldn't be used for space-time travel. Generally, the most dangerous places were those places that couldn't be used for space-time travel. After the spaceship entered the space-time jump point, the few people were slightly relieved. After returning to the main hall, they relaxed and sat down on the chair. This space-time travel would take at least 2 days, so during these 2 days they were still safe. Looking at the incomparably calm Lu Feng, Li Kong smiled and said, "Futu, I don't know how you plan to use such a huge fortune this time." During this period, Li Kong always looked for Lu Feng, and Lu Feng could clearly feel that Li Kong wanted to recruit him. However, after Lu Feng revealed that he had a family, this enthusiasm obviously decreased a lot. Even so, Li Kang's enthusiasm for Lu Feng was very obvious. After all, anyone would be willing to be friends with a young alchemist with great potential. Lu Feng had already calculated the use of this huge sum of money, so he directly told them his idea. Obviously, after hearing Lu Feng's plan, everyone was slightly shocked. After all, 20 million divine item points was the lifetime savings of many warriors. However, after Lu Feng obtained it, he would have to spend 16 million to accelerate time for a month. This was really terrifying. Actually, Fudu, if you really need time, why don't you accelerate time by 3 times for 2 months? After all, 1 month is not much different from 2 months. In that case, you can save at least 12 million. You should know that 12 million divine item points is enough to buy a lot of elixirs. It will help you improve your mental strength. If Lu Feng was just a normal psychic, he might have done this. Unfortunately, he wasn't. If he couldn't break through the barrier, it would be useless no matter how many elixirs he had. Therefore, in Lu Feng's eyes, time was much more important than elixirs. However, this was someone else's good intention after all, so Lu Feng couldn't directly reject it. Moreover, he couldn't say these things out loud. Therefore, after saying that he would take a look, he didn't say anything else. Seeing Lu Feng's expression, these people knew what Lu Feng was thinking. However, these divine item points were Lu Feng's after all, so they couldn't say anything more. Moreover, Lu Feng still gave them 40 million divine item points, which made them even more speechless. Among them, they also began to discuss the use of the divine item points in the future. To them, 20 million divine item points per person was indeed a huge sum of money. Even they would need a few years, or even more than 10 years to gather that amount. Seeing these people constantly discussing, Lu Feng didn't have the mood to think about it. After all, 20 million divine item points were really nothing to him. As long as he could complete the condensation of the greater success realm. Then, not to mention 20 million, even 200 billion wouldn't be a big deal. Very quickly, 2 days passed. By then, everyone was no longer as relaxed as they were before. Zhou Yuan was already standing in the cockpit, and the others were already fully focused, ready to take action at any time. This is the only way to get to Qinglan City from number 33 city to number 48 city. Due to the existence of spatial turbulence, it's impossible to travel through time and space on this road. Therefore, this is the most chaotic and dangerous area. If we're accidentally stopped by those lone travelers, it'll be dangerous, so everyone has to be careful at all times. Even Lu Feng understood these things. In the battlefield of the foreign regions, no one who could become a lone traveler was weak. After all, if one wanted to be a lone traveler, they had to be backed by powerful strength. This was because they would often encounter a group. If they wanted to win, they had to have overwhelming strength. Therefore, the strength of a lone traveler was quite terrifying. In this area, there are few more famous lone travelers. They're all extremely powerful, and almost all of them are above the perfect stage. The most powerful one even has the strength of an advanced perfect stage expert. Zhou Yuan's face darkened slightly. Although they were all at the upheaval stage, There was an insurmountable gap between the upheaval stage and the perfect stage. Not to mention the distance. Just their strength alone was a difference of 10 times between the two stages. This was the most basic strength, and with the addition of amplification, it was normal for it to be 100 times stronger. Therefore, if they all fought together against a perfect stage expert, the result would be instant annihilation. After all, there were too few geniuses who could challenge those at a higher stage. I have some contact with one of the lone travelers, so he won't find trouble with us. After all, we're all humans, so we'll help if we can. But I can't communicate with the other races. If we encounter them, all we have to do is run for our lives. If we're caught, there's only one outcome, and that's death. Everyone was silent, but Li Kai didn't care. After all, his true strength was at the advanced upheaval stage, and with his god's bloodline, he could even escape from an intermediate perfect stage expert. With such strength, he wasn't very worried at all. Moreover, although there were no family guardians in this foreign battlefield, he still had the guardian crystal on him. With it, Li Kai knew that he could hold on for a while under the attack of a peak perfect stage expert. Of course, no one noticed Li Kai's expression. In their eyes, Li Kai was the weakest besides Lu Feng. When these people calculated the combat strength, they didn't take him into consideration. Besides Li Kai, there was another person who didn't care. That was Lu Feng. Now, his combat strength had reached an incredible level. Previously, he had enough strength to fight against any advanced perfect stage expert. And when so many terrifying combat skills appeared in his mind, and his martial Dao incarnation was upgraded by 3 stages, he could fight, which increased his strength by several times. Although he couldn't increase the strength of a peak perfect stage expert, he had no problem fighting against an ordinary peak perfect stage expert. Therefore, Lu Feng wasn't very worried about warriors. But even so, Lu Feng still had his own worries. What he was worried about were those who surpassed warriors. Chapter 308. Big Brother Zhou, won't there be demigods, or even gods here? The combat power of a demigod was absolutely terrifying. They were more than 10 times stronger than a martial artist at the peak of the perfect stage. After all, the first level of the demigod realm was the deification of strength. Therefore, the gap between a demigod and a martial artist at the peak of the perfect stage was like the gap between a warrior and a warrior. When he heard Lu Feng's question, Zhou Yuan smiled and explained, Futu, demigods and gods are not existences that can be cultivated by lone wolves. They have powerful forces that provide them with resources for cultivation. Of course, there are demigods and even gods who are lone wolves, but why would such existences come to a place like this? If they want to go, they would at least go to the border between the territories. They would even go to the chaotic holy lands and battlefields. They don't even care about the border between cities like ours. Lu Feng nodded gently. It was not that there were no such existences, but those powerhouses would not even bother to come to such a place. All right, everyone, let's cheer up. Although the chances of encountering lone wolves are very small, if you do, you have to try your best to escape. After saying this, Zhou Yuan walked to the cockpit. The others were also ready at any time. Seeing this, Lu Feng felt that there was nothing to do. The others did not take Lu Feng seriously. Lu Feng quietly sat in the same spot, and his mind was already immersed in comprehending the pill mantra. Time passed quickly, and half a day passed. It should be known that at their speed, it would take them about 9 hours to pass through the border area. And now, more than 6 hours had passed. During this period, everyone was unusually cautious. Although 6 hours had passed, and nothing had happened, they still didn't seem to relax. Seeing this, Lu Feng was very impressed. He understood that the existence of this team was cautious. It was only in this way that they were able to turn danger into safety time and time again without losing any members. However, this situation didn't last long. Just as Lu Feng was gaining a new understanding of the refining techniques in the pill scripture, the entire spaceship suddenly shook violently. At this moment, everyone's expression changed drastically. Zhou Yuan immediately stabilized the ship. The speed of the spaceship became slower and slower. Everyone's expression became uglier and uglier. An incomparably heavy atmosphere appeared in the cabin, making it difficult for people to breathe. Lu Feng woke up from his comprehension. His complexion wasn't very good either. If it wasn't necessary, Lu Feng really didn't want to expose his strength. After all, he was now involved in too many things. Once the foreign races knew of his existence, they would probably do everything in their power to kill him. At that time, he would really be in danger. However, things were different now, because they had encountered something that they were most unwilling to encounter. Zhou Yuan's expression was incomparably dark as he looked at the four of them. He said with an unusually heavy tone, "This time, we are unlucky. If the other party only wants to plunder resources, then hand over a part of it. If they want to fight, I'll do my best to hold them back. When the time comes, run as fast as you can. Remember, no matter what happens, run as fast as you can. Don't look back. Do you all hear me?" The few of them were silent. For the first time, no one answered Zhou Yuan. Lu Feng was the same. He knew that these people had been together for countless years. Their relationship was no worse than that of family. At such a dangerous time, they couldn't abandon their family and run away alone. There was no need to deliberately say anything. Just their attitude alone was enough to say everything. Seeing this scene, a trace of anxiety appeared in Zhou Yuan's eyes. He still wanted to say something, but tea powder had already spoken. "Zhou Yuan, you're the person I love the most in my life. Ever since I left the clan, I have lost all my family. You're my only family. If you don't exist anymore, then I really won't find any meaning in living. So if you want to leave, let's leave together. If you want to stay, let's stay together. You don't have to say anything. I have already made up my mind." Tea Powder's expression was incomparably resolute. Everyone could see that she wasn't pretending. She really had made up her mind. At this moment, Lu Feng's heart was slightly moved. But he didn't say anything, because things hadn't reached that point yet. It hadn't reached the point of life and death. Zhou Yuan wanted to say something, but at this moment, a terrifying vibration came from the entire ship. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Without hesitation, they rushed out. Looking at the 7 people in front of him, Zhou Yuan took a deep breath. Li Kong and the others did the same. At this moment, even Li Kai's expression was incomparably ugly, because the 7 people in front of them were all experts. All of them were cultivators above the perfect stage. 7 perfect stage cultivators. This was something no one had expected. Even Zhou Yuan, who had prepared for the worst, was at a loss at this moment. According to the information he received, there were at most 10 perfect stage cultivators here. But now there were 7 of them here. 7 perfect stage cultivators. Even one of them could easily crush them. And 7 of them meant that they had no chance of escaping. After the confusion in Zhou Yuan's eyes faded, it was replaced by despair. If there was only one perfect initial stage cultivator, they might still have a chance to escape. But there were 7 of them. It was absolutely impossible. But Zhou Yuan was someone who had seen many storms. In the face of these terrifying experts, he finally forced himself to calm down. He tried to squeeze out a smile. Using the universal language, he said to the 7 perfect stage cultivators of different races, "Everyone, I am Zhou Yuan of the human race. I have a good relationship with Feng Dianhao here. I hope you could be magnanimous and let us go." Feng Dianhao was a lone traveler here. He was also a lone traveler of the human race. According to Zhou Yuan's introduction, Feng Dianhao had the strength of an intermediate perfect stage cultivator. He was very famous here. At this moment, he mentioned him in the hope that these people would not make things difficult for them on account of the fact that they were all lone travelers. Unfortunately, although Zhou Yuan's idea was good, the result was cruel. Their expressions did not change in the slightest at the mention of Feng Dianhao's title. In fact, a sliver of disdain appeared on the majestic foreign race expert's face. Feng Dianhao, he was quite a character. Unfortunately, he did not know how to appreciate kindness and has been killed by us. Killed? Zhou Yuan's body swayed for a moment. He did not have much of a friendship with Feng Dianhao, and Zhou Yuan was not sad because of Feng Dianhao's death. He was only acting this way because they were the ones who had killed Fengdi and Hao. Zhou Yuan had just said that he was related to Fengdi and Hao. Wasn't that pushing him into a corner? Sure enough, he looked at Zhou Yuan and the people behind him. A bloodthirsty smile hung from the corners of the foreign race expert's mouth. I originally planned to kill you all, but since you are related to Fengdi and Hao, I will not let you die comfortably. He gently waved his arm behind him, indicating that the cultivators could attack. However, only one of the 7 perfect stage cultivators actually moved. An incomparably cruel smile hung from the corners of his lips as he looked at Zhou Yuan and the group behind him. She gently extended her sparkling and translucent arm. It was only a slow wave, but it had already struck out a shocking blow. Zhou Yuan, who stood in front of everyone, did not retreat. He had forcibly withstood all the slaughter. Vomit blood, and was sent flying. His entire body felt as if it had been smashed to pieces, making it nearly impossible for him to move. It was as if he was about to be completely destroyed. Upon seeing this, tea leaves crazily rushed towards Zhou Yuan, tears instantly drenching his eyes. At this moment, she was not some powerful female cultivator, but a pitiful woman who had to watch her beloved die. Li Kong and Li Kai tightly clenched their fists, but did not step forward. They silently watched everything unfold. Lu Feng's expression was similarly incomparably cautious. These unaffiliated cultivators were nothing in front of him. Even the strongest among them was only at the perfect intermediate stage. Such strength was nothing in Lu Feng's eyes. He didn't even need to boost himself to his strongest state. He was already strong enough to sweep through everything. However, Lu Feng did not make a move. Not only because he could see that the perfect stage cultivator had no intention of killing him, but also because Lu Feng could not casually make a move. Because he felt it. He felt that there was a peerless figure hidden somewhere around him. It was a kind of trembling in the depths of his soul, as if some powerful cultivator was coveting him, ready to give him the strongest blow at any time. Therefore, Lu Feng did not make a move just now. The perfect stage cultivator grinned hideously and took a step forward. And it was this step that seemed to cause the void to vibrate, causing Zhou Yuan, who was already seriously injured, to spit out another mouthful of blood. Tea Leaves really went crazy at the sight of this. She finally got up and charged toward the perfect stage cultivator. Seeing this scene, the unaffiliated cultivators smiled strangely. They liked this kind of despair after madness. However, before Tea Leaves could reach him, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. Seeing this figure, Match's crazy eyes shone with a rational light. But a moment later, this light was replaced by madness. Get out of my way, Li Kai. Today, even if I die, I will leave something behind for them. Chapter 309. Li Kai kept his arm around Matcha. No matter how hard she struggled, she could not get past Li Kai. At this moment, many people saw the problem. After struggling for a long time, she even used her power, but the result did not change at all. Under Li Kai's restraint, Matcha could not even move. At this moment, she finally realized the problem. Li Kai did not seem to hear her. He just looked coldly at the 7 people in the distance. 7 people, we admit defeat this time. There are 20,000 starlight grass on the spaceship. I think you know about the mission of the starlight grass. We will leave all the goods behind. I hope you can let us go. Is this possible? The moment he finished speaking, he released all the power of an advanced upheaval stage warrior. At this moment, everyone was stunned. However, after a while, their stunned expressions changed and were replaced by completely different expressions. On the side of the lone wolves, there was a strange smile on their faces, as if they were amused by Li Kai's overconfident words. As for Zhou Yuan and the others, they were deep in thought. Who do you think you are? You are an upheaval stage warrior at such a young age. You are indeed a genius. However, just because you are a genius, we will let you go. You think we will let you go? What a joke, what a joke. Finally, the strongest warrior at the peak of the intermediate perfect stage spoke. The race he belonged to was relatively advanced, and his appearance was already very similar to that of the human race. However, the color of their skin and the wrinkles on their faces were clearly distinguishable from humans. As if he felt that saying this was not enough, the middle stage perfect stage warrior added again. Moreover, I hate geniuses the most. What I like the most is to kill geniuses. There was silence between heaven and earth. No one spoke. Everyone looked at Li Kai quietly, waiting for him to say something. However, Li Kai did not say anything. He just slowly released his aura, the peak of the advanced upheaval stage, the peak of the upheaval stage. Breakthrough, breakthrough. Perfect stage. His aura continued to soar until he reached the realm of a perfect intermediate stage martial artist before it slowly stopped. At this moment, whether it was the Lone Wolf or Zhou Yuan's group, everyone was deeply shocked. They were all muttering the same words, God's descendant bloodline. Only those with the bloodline of the god descendant could have such a shocking increase in strength, and only then could they achieve such a terrifying increase in combat strength. The 7 solo cultivators on the other side all had extremely ugly expressions on their faces. Naturally, they could feel Li Kai's power that belonged to the perfect intermediate stage. However, this kind of power was not enough to pose a threat to them. Compared to them, there were a total of 3 people who had the strength of a middle stage, perfect phase martial artist. 3 perfect middle stage warriors were enough to easily suppress Li Kai, who relied on his bloodline to reach the perfect middle stage. Even if he had the clan's martial skill, he was no exception. However, these people still hesitated, because this god-descendant bloodline not only represented a terrifying increase in combat strength, but also represented a family, a terrifying power. They naturally understood the significance of being able to increase their strength by 3 small ranks. This meant that behind the young man in front of him, there was someone with the bloodline of the sacred truth body. If such a terrifying power wanted to kill them, it would be a piece of cake. However, as if they had thought of something, these people's smiles became more and more strange. The son of a first-rate family of the human race? Not bad, not bad. Today, I can actually encounter such a big harvest. Thinking about it, you must have a lot of benefits on you. Li Kai did not say anything, but his eyes became colder and colder. He knew that today's matter could no longer be resolved peacefully. These people were all desperados, and they would not be afraid of his family at all. Therefore, he was ready to fight with his life. After a little calculation, the other party had 3 middle-stage perfect phase warriors and 4 beginner perfect phase warriors. Those beginner perfect phase warriors were nothing to him individually. However, once they joined forces, it would be difficult for him to resist. After all, he was not a very stable middle-stage perfect phase warrior. As for the other 3 middle-stage perfect phase warriors, he could not deal with any of them. Perhaps he could rely on the guardian crystal given by the clan elders to ensure his safety for a while, but what about after that? Once the guardian crystal's time was up, he would inevitably fall into a dead end. Li Kai also knew that here, the guardian crystal could not connect to the clan elders. Therefore, the guardian crystal could only be used to block a few attacks. At this moment, Li Kai also fell into a kind of despair. Taking a deep breath, Li Kai took one last look at the people behind him and said slowly and seriously, "Big brothers, big sister, and little brother. In a while, I will try my best to delay the 7 of them. You guys, try your best to escape. If you meet my father one day, please tell him that his son is not a coward." The moment his voice fell, Li Kai had already rushed up. At this moment, he forgot about life and death, because he knew that this was a situation where he would die. He had to fight hard to win a chance for the teammates behind him to escape. Only in this way, his death would not be in vain. In the future, there would be a possibility of revenge for him. How powerful was a middle-stage perfect phase warrior? These people did not understand before. After all, they were only at the upheaval stage and did not understand the strength of the perfect phase. But at this moment, whether it was Zhou Yuan, Chai Mo, or Li Kong, they finally understood. The perfect stage was the stage of mortals. Everything had already reached the pinnacle of perfection. This was a terrifying existence. With a wave of his hand, he could reverse the flow of mountains and rivers and make time and space tremble. Li Kai did not hide anything, because he knew his cultivation level and strength. If he still hid his strength, he would be completely suppressed in an instant, and he would no longer have any power to resist. Therefore, the moment he came up, he used his most terrifying killing move after using his martial skill. Behind him, the shadow of the most ancient inheritor of the truth bloodline was reflected. It was a terrifying king of the human race. He stood quietly with a deep gaze, as if he could see through time and space. Lu Feng did not know much about the many first-class clans, so he could not tell which clan Li Kai belonged to just by looking at this vision. However, Lu Feng knew that Li Kai's clan was definitely an extremely powerful clan. It was most likely ranked above the Mu clan. Moreover, if Li Kai did not hide his real name, it was very likely that he belonged to that clan. Surging power whizzed over, as if it could crush the whole world. Using his bloodline power to the limit, coupled with the use of the inherited martial technique, Li Kai had erupted with all his previous shocking battle strength. The 7 perfect stage cultivators all showed a hint of caution. Although they did not think highly of Li Kai, they were still very careful when the terrifying martial technique belonging to the virtual king appeared. Finally, the huge killing move arrived. None of the solo practitioners chose to face it head-on. They all turned around and began to dodge using an inexplicable mystery. The 7 figures dispersed. Li Kai, who was in the midst of endless killing, was taken aback for a moment, but he made a decision after a moment. He gave up on 6 of them and focused on one of them instead. It was a beginner perfect stage cultivator who was also Li Kai's target this time. After using his most powerful strength, Li Kai already understood. Even in his most powerful state, he could not fight against any of the 3 intermediate perfect stage cultivators. Instead of meaningless chaos, it was better to directly kill one of them. In this way, at least he could leave something behind. Obviously, the beginner perfect stage cultivator did not expect Li Kai to choose him. His expression changed fiercely, and he ran even faster, almost reaching the limit of his life. Seeing this scene, no one helped him because if it was him, he would not help anyone either. Solo practitioners were all selfish. In their hearts, they only cared about themselves. If it was something that did not matter, then they might not care. However, if it was related to their own safety, then they would not set foot on it even if there was the slightest possibility. Obviously, the current Li Kai had gone crazy and was going to fight with his life. Li Kai in this state was incomparably dangerous. No one was willing to provoke him. Even the 3 intermediate perfect stage cultivators who were still stronger than Li Kai were the same. Although he used all his strength to increase his strength, in front of the crazy Li Kai, his strength was obviously not enough. Finally, looking at the powerful killing intent, the beginner perfect stage cultivator had the same crazy look in his eyes. He gave up on escaping and actually used this last bit of time to use all the strength he could use to forcibly resist the most powerful attack. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled, and space fluctuated. It was as if the entire area began to collapse. This was the strength of a perfect stage cultivator. This was the terrifying killing intent of a perfect stage cultivator. A figure flew out, and dark purple blood spurted out of his mouth. It was strangely deep and eye-catching. This was the beginner perfect stage cultivator. Although he was strong, facing Li Kai in this state, he was still unable to resist. Therefore, it was reasonable for him to be severely injured. The moment he was sent flying, the 6 perfect stage lone wolves who were originally fleeing in all directions suddenly moved. Together, they used their terrifying strength to strike at the center of the riot. This was a good opportunity. After all, the current Li Kai was in a period of emptiness after killing. It was the best opportunity for them to win without paying any price. Finally, there was a terrifying turbulence between heaven and earth again. Endless space was distorted, and this area seemed to be in a chaotic space-time tunnel. No one could survive in it, and they would all be slaughtered. Chapter 3:10. The previous attack was a terrifying killing blow from the few perfect stage lone wolves. Although it wasn't their strongest attack, it was still one of the few that they had. Although it was rushed, and they couldn't use their strongest attack. However, when the 6 perfect stage lone wolves attacked at the same time, the superposition of their power far exceeded the power of 3 or even 4 of them attacking at the same time. At the center of the riot, a terrifying wave of energy spread out again. Just the aftershock alone sent Li Kong and the others flying hundreds of miles away. The huge spaceship from before was smashed into smithereens by this attack. Apart from a storage box used to store the starlight grass, everything else was almost annihilated in the aftershock. At this moment, only Lu Feng was able to remain motionless. Unfortunately, no one paid attention to him. No one cared about him. Cha Emo tightly protected Zhou Yuan in her arms. His body had also suffered heavy injuries, but she didn't have the time to care too much. Her gaze, Zhou Yuan's gaze, and even Li Kang's gaze were all focused on the central area. In their hearts, Li Kang's safety had already surpassed everything else. Time slowly passed. During this period of time, no one had appeared in the center of the chaos. Their expressions grew more and more desperate, although Li Kai didn't have a deep friendship with them. But in the end, Li Kong faced this terrifying attack in order to help them. They understood that if Li Kong didn't reveal his cultivation and didn't attract any attention, he would have chosen to escape. If he had chosen to escape, he would have had a slim chance of survival. But for them, Li Kai ultimately gave up everything. His final choice was, Li Qiang, you have a good son. Your son is indeed outstanding. He passed our test. In a daze, Zhou Yuan seemed to recall the words of his peerless companion 20 years ago when he left. He had said that 20 years later, he would send his son here for them to assess whether or not his son was qualified to be his son. Now, these people had admitted it. They were willing to admit from the bottom of their hearts that Li Kai was indeed qualified to be his son, the son of his peerless genius. Finally, the chaos in the depths of the riot was about to completely disappear. Until now, there was still no sign of anyone appearing. Seeing this scene, the solo cultivators all laughed. Zhou Yuan and the others despaired. However, Lu Feng, who stood in the same spot without moving an inch, still had that expressionless look on his face. It was as if he didn't care about anything. The final moment had arrived. Many people didn't want to watch it anymore or didn't want to, because in everyone's hearts, Li Kai had already been completely annihilated. Everything had already been settled. But everyone was stunned when they saw that. Although I, Li Kai, am not a monstrous genius or a young paragon, I am still a paragon. But I'm not someone you can humiliate. My bloodline is incomparably noble. My glory shall shine eternally. Even if I die, I will not retreat. I will never take a step back. The translucent light curtain slowly protected them. All the destructive energy lingered around the light curtain, but they couldn't enter it at all. Protect, the guardian crystal, the perfect intermediate stage solo cultivator's face was gloomy. He had already recognized the translucent light curtain beside Li Kai. They didn't expect Li Kai to have a guardian crystal. But a moment later, an even more sinister expression appeared. He looked at Li Kai, and his voice carried a terrifying ruthlessness. The guardian crystal is very terrifying, but this is not the universe. This is the battlefield of the foreign regions, a battlefield of its own. Your guardian crystal can't allow the experts of your family to come here and save you. Let's see what you can do when the time is up. Kid, you're dead. No matter what I have to pay, I will make sure you don't have a corpse left. The sinister voice made people tremble, and fear filled their hearts. That middle stage, perfect stage lone wanderer was no longer hiding anything. To them, the fact that Li Kai was able to block their attack was the greatest insult to them. How could they tolerate such a situation? Looking at the sinister expressions of the solo cultivators, there was no fear in Li Kai's eyes. In fact, he even smiled. His smile was so resolute, so calm. He didn't say a word. Instead, he closed his eyes. At this moment, Li Kai was so strange. But as time passed, The expressions of the solo cultivators became more and more fearful, more and more extreme. This is the fluctuation of a supreme technique. He's using the last bit of time to accumulate power and use a supreme technique. A supreme technique was the most powerful killing technique. It was the most terrifying killing force that could break through the limit. The longer it took to accumulate power, the stronger the power of the supreme technique. At the same time, the side effects would be even more terrifying. But now, they had already walked into a desperate situation. They had walked into the zone of death. No matter what, they were destined to die. Therefore, Li Kai had no other choice. Rather than letting me die like this, I'd rather have never appeared. My glory, my family's glory, will not change because of the strength of the opponent. I may be fearful or I may be timid, but I will never back down. Even if I die, I'll make you pay the heaviest price. The accumulation of the supreme technique had reached the peak. In the next moment, it could be unleashed. Once such power was unleashed, it might really be able to reach the level of a high-level perfect phase warrior for a short period of time. A high-level perfect phase warrior was enough to suppress anything. Although it might not be able to kill the 3 mid-level perfect phase solo cultivators, it would not be a problem to severely injure them and kill the other 4 low-level perfect phase solo cultivators. Undoubtedly, they did not want to pay such a price. But at this moment, they could not leave, because Li Kai had already locked onto them with his will. Once they retreated, they would not have the slightest ability to resist. They watched as the power of the protective crystal began to fade slowly. The faces of these solo cultivators had become more and more gloomy. The 3 low-level perfect phase solo cultivators and a severely injured solo cultivator all showed a look of despair. They knew that once the final killing came, their fates would be sealed. Their fate was sealed. Finally, the power of the light screen disappeared. This was supposed to be the moment when the 6 lone wolves were the happiest, because the disappearance of the light screen meant that there was no longer any power that could stop them from taking care of Li Kai. But at this moment, these people did not want this moment to come most, because they had already seen the formation of Li Kai's supreme technique. You've already done very well. You can let go now. An arm gently rested on Li Kai's body. It was so calm and did not show any signs of fear. But it was this gentle touch that caused Li Kai's face to distort incomparably. In an instant, a mouthful of bright red blood spurted out, splattering the void. In the end, the supreme technique was not unleashed, but the power of the supreme technique had already condensed. So at the last moment, Li Kai still suffered a huge backlash. But this kind of injury only needed to be recuperated for a period of time. After all, Li Kai was a perfect phase warrior. Once this supreme technique was fully unleashed, Li Kai would definitely perish. Feeling the power coming from the arm and looking at the owner of the arm, a trace of disbelief appeared on Li Kai's face. Not only him, but everyone's expression was the same. They did not even notice how he had arrived. It was as if he had been there all along. Everything should have developed like this. Looking at the figure, Li Kai muttered, "Foot." Lu Feng turned around and looked at Li Kai, whose face was distorted, as if he was enduring something. He smiled faintly. "You are from the Leaf family of Yaolon, right?" Li Kai was slightly taken aback. For a moment, he forgot everything. He nodded his head lightly. He muttered, "How did you know?" What answered him was still Lu Feng's smile. There are not many families with the surname Li in the Federation. Coincidentally, only the Leaf family of Yaolon has the inheritance of the sacred truth body. Li Kai did not hide his real name. He had the bloodline of a divine descendant, so he must be from the Leaf family. Among the first-rate families in the Federation, only the Leaf family of Yaolon had the surname Li. Li Kai was silent. This was a tacit agreement. Lu Feng continued, "How is Yongheng now?" "Yongheng? Li Yongheng of the Li family?" In an instant, a strange expression appeared on Li Kai's face. He did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Do you know the young master of the Li family?" Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. However, he quickly smiled and nodded. "That's right. Yongheng has the existence of a sealed bloodline. It is only natural for him to become the young master of the Leaf family. Not bad. At least you've given me some face. At least you're a monster. Hearing Lu Feng's tone and the fact that he could even mention Li Yongheng's sealed bloodline, Li Kai was certain that Lu Feng knew Li Yongheng. Otherwise, he would not have known that this was a secret of the Li family. Just as he was about to say something, Lu Feng stretched out his arm and gently stopped him from saying what he was about to say. There is no need to say anything more. Your performance was really good. I believe that you will be able to reach even higher limits in the future. Leave this matter to me. After all, I cannot hide forever. A trembling radiance flowed within his eyes. Li Kai could even feel his soul trembling as he felt the terrifying power contained within those eyes. At this moment, he did not say anything. He already understood. He understood that Fudu was just like him. He had hidden his strength. He had even hidden his exceptional strength. Lu Feng took a step forward gently. He instantly appeared before Li Kai and the other lone wolves. A moment later, the aura of a peak evolution period martialist was no longer concealed. Instead, it erupted completely. However, when they sensed Lu Feng's aura, they all had strange expressions on their faces. It was not because Lu Feng was too strong, but because he was too weak. The middle-level perfect stage lone wolf looked at Lu Feng, and the strange expression on his face became even more intense. He even said, "Not bad, not bad. Not bad at all. You're only 18 or 19 years old, right? You have the strength of a peak evolution period martialist. With this kind of talent, you can almost become an emperor among the human race. It is a pity that your current strength is still too weak." After scanning the surroundings and confirming that Lu Feng's strength was only at the peak of the evolution period, the Lone Ranger nodded his head lightly. Too weak, too weak. Even if Lu Feng was the Emperor of Massacre, he would only be able to reach the peak of perfection for a short period of time at most. Any lone traveler that walked out of this place could easily kill him 1,000,000 times over. Therefore, they only felt that it was funny. They found it funny that this peerless genius or peerless monster was overestimating himself. Lu Feng remained expressionless in the face of these people's mockery. He was still as calm as ever. It was as if these people did not exist in his eyes. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Feng looked around slightly, as if he was checking for something. After a long time, he sighed slowly. "You should come out. I have already shown myself. That means I intend to use my full strength. With just these pieces of trash, it is impossible for them to stop my massacre." Anger, boundless anger. When they heard this, the lone wolves' expressions changed drastically. The light in their eyes seemed to be able to completely crush Lu Feng. However, in the face of this, Lu Feng was still the same as before. He completely ignored them. After a long time, there was still no movement. When he saw this, Lu Feng sighed deeply. For the first time, he looked at the lone wolves. "Tell your leader to come out. I really want to see who dares to covet me." This time, the lone wolves did not have much resentment. At this moment, they were confused. Leader? When they looked at each other, they saw the confusion in each other's eyes. At this moment, they even thought that this peerless genius was hallucinating. When he saw this, Lu Feng was slightly stunned. However, he soon nodded lightly. He slowly said, "It seems that you are also a group of pitiful people. A group of pitiful people who have been schemed against and sent to your deaths." Chapter 3:11. He took a deep breath. At this moment, Lu Feng's expression turned ice cold. However, a pitiful person must have a hateful side. Congratulations, all of you have ignited my killing intent. Therefore, don't say that I am bullying the weak. All of this is what you brought upon yourselves. The lone travelers wanted to say something. However, at this moment, they were unable to say anything, because at the next moment, an illusory figure appeared behind Lu Feng. It covered the sky and covered the earth. Its head was the blue dome of heaven, and its feet were the yellow springs. The majesty of Supreme Emperor was completely revealed at this moment. That was an ancient and terrifying illusory figure. It was a peak illusory figure that surpassed all existences. The illusory figure of the human king appeared. That is, many existences were dumbstruck. Then they were shocked. After that, they were boiling with fear. That is the illusory figure of the human king. That is definitely the illusory figure of the human king. I have seen young Master Luo, one of the 7 emperors, use it. That's right, it is him. He is not called Fudu at all. His surname is Lu. His surname is definitely Lu. He is the direct descendant of the #1 aristocratic family in the universe, the human king Lu family. Li Kai shouted crazily. He had already recognized it. How could he, who had seen Lu Luo use the human king's bloodline before, forget about this kind of fluctuation? This kind of fluctuation was the greatest and most invincible fluctuation in space and time. Following his shout, all the lone travelers took a step back fiercely. Although this step was less than a meter of distance, all of this already showed that they were afraid. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. The ancestor of the human king was an absolutely invincible existence in an era. He was the most terrifying expert in this era. I hate the heavens for allowing me to live in the same era as the king. In front of him, even the light of the overlord of this era would dim. As for the human king Lu family, it was the #1 aristocratic family in the current era. It was the #1 aristocratic family that even the bloodline of the #1 emperor clan in the universe, Indra, was suppressed. Not long ago, the human king Lu family was enraged because of certain matter. Unexpectedly, 2 variant Tao Supremes came out from the ancient sacred land. This kind of news, everyone heard about it. Everyone understood. Ever since the human king disappeared, the human king Lu family had never given birth to a divine king. However, this didn't mean that the #1 ancient family could be easily humiliated. The 2 great heretic supremes represented the combat strength of the 2 great divine kings. Among the peak races in the entire universe, there were very few that could produce 2 great supremes. In other words, the Lu family, which had revealed a portion of its strength, was already comparable to the top clans. Who would dare to look down on such a Lu family? Who would dare to look down on them? Therefore, when they saw the human monarch's shadow behind Lu Feng and realized that Lu Feng was a descendant of the human monarch's Lu family, all the lone travelers were completely shocked. After a while, the leader of the lone travelers, who was at the perfection intermediate stage, burst into laughter. It was a smile that bordered on madness, a smile that had forgotten everything. Human monarch bloodline? Good. Very good. Who would have thought that I, Kong Lai Yimeng, would have the chance to wipe out the Killer King's bloodline? The other lone travelers in the surroundings also had crazed expressions on their faces. Lu Feng had already said this a moment ago. He wanted these people dead, since they would die anyway. Offending the human monarch's Lu family didn't matter anymore. After the human monarch's bloodline was completely released, Lu Feng's strength reached the perfection beginner stage. Everyone knew that if he combined it with the human monarch's exceptional cultivation technique, the human monarch scripture, then Lu Feng would definitely be able to sweep away everyone in the perfection beginner stage. However, they didn't just have the perfection beginner stage. Although they had already seriously injured one of them, causing him to lose his combat strength, they still had 3 perfection beginner stage experts. However, they still had 3 peak early stage perfect phase martial artists and 3 peak mid-stage perfect phase martial artists. This kind of combat strength was enough. It was really enough. Li Kai looked at Lu Feng's back. The so-called weakness he once had completely disappeared at this moment. In his eyes, Lu Feng was so tall and sturdy. It was as if this backbone was holding up the sky of an era. Lu Feng's cold smile was spreading. I know that the strength of the perfection beginner stage is not enough. It's still not enough to kill all of you. Since that's the case, then all of you, despair. The ancient great devil had broken through the obstacles of the past and passed through the limits of time and space reincarnation. From that primitive era, he had finally reappeared. The power of the great devil, support. The appearance of the emperor, glory and splendor, the descent of the emperor. A strange power cover. Finally, all the strange phenomena disappeared. A phantom that overlooked billions of living beings, engraved by time and space, remembered by the reincarnation era, worshipped by countless immortals and devils, was born. That was Lu Feng's strongest state, the phantom of the great emperor. Lu Feng had actually reached the peak of the past. However, it wasn't over yet. It wasn't over yet. Everything was far from over. How could he, Lu Feng, only be like this? Even the king of chaos, who was at the God King level, was unable to kill him. How could he possibly be so simple? Come out. The moment those 3 words landed, after the phantom of the great emperor, an even more terrifying phantom appeared. At the top, no trace could be seen in the endless haze. An incomparably majestic, powerful, ancient, and mysterious Futu pagoda was quietly floating in the air. It was as if all the fate and karma were entangled by the phantom. It was as if all the laws and mysteries were gathered by it. Endless runes flickered, surpassing the heaven, earth profound, yellow, endless desolation. Martial Tao incarnation, heaven-reaching Futu, also appeared. What is this? Madness. It was madness again. But this time, the craziness was the craziness of terror. When all the blessings were completed, Lu Feng's combat strength was already indescribable. They knew that Lu Feng in this state had already reached the realm of a high-level perfect stage warrior. Even the power he emitted seemed to be able to fight against a peak perfect stage warrior. The combat strength of a peak perfect stage warrior? The combat strength of a mid-level perfect stage warrior? Was there still a need to compare? At this moment, they finally understood. They finally understood why this person with the human king's bloodline called them trash. Why did he, who was only at the peak evolution stage, decide the life and death of these perfect stage warriors? It turned out that the root of everything was strength. It was not only these lone travelers who were shocked. Even Li Kai behind Lu Feng, Zhou Yuan, and the others were endlessly stunned. They had never thought of it. The person they thought was the weakest, a little brother who needed protection, was actually the strongest among them. He actually had the most honorable status and the most terrifying strength. In the moment of danger, in the moment of despair, in the moment when the gods could not protect them, he was the one who held up their hope. He was the one who replaced the gods to protect them. I know. Li Kai seemed to have thought of something. His expression became more and more frenzied. He looked at Lu Feng and had already lost the image of an aristocratic family's descendant. You are Lu Feng. You are Emperor Lu Feng. You are the rumored Emperor Lu Feng who was killed by the foreign race's divine king. I should have thought of it earlier. I should have understood it earlier. You're known as the most talented person in the history of the human race, the only one comparable to the human king. You're known as the most likely person to compete with the human king or even surpass the human king in this era. How could you die like this? You really didn't die. You really are still alive. You still have to create your own glory, your own miracle, your own sacred miracle. Lu Feng. If it was in the past, then these people would absolutely not have heard of this name. Even if he was the successor of the human king Lu family, it would still be impossible. But now it was different. Because of his possible death, the human king Lu family showed their terror for the first time in 4,000 years. They had produced 2 mutated supreme beings. As for the human race, an unprecedented 4 heretic paragons had appeared in their ranks. Even the most mysterious federal university had produced a legendary celestial emperor. And in this foreign battlefield, the human king and the netherworld race had clashed because of suspicion. They suspected that the netherworld race had caused all of this. One person, one war. Just because of him alone, the entire universe was boiling. It was as if the supreme being, the divine king, had fallen into a complete frenzy. Everything was in turmoil. Lu Feng, it was this name that had caused all of this. Once they thought that this was an excuse of the human race. As for saying that he was comparable to the human king, it was an exaggeration. It was just an excuse for this war. But now, when they really saw Lu Feng, they finally understood that everything was not an exaggeration. It really was not an exaggeration. Such an existence was comparable to the human king. It was possible, not just possible. It was certain. His existence was the ultimate embodiment of fate. He was destined to be glorious and eternal. He was destined to be as great as eternity. Lu Feng was in his strongest state. It was not to deal with the few people in front of him. It was because they alone were not enough. It was far from enough. Not only were they not enough, but they were also not qualified. Lu Feng was doing this for him. He was doing this for him. He was hiding somewhere and watching them all the time. In the next moment, Lu Feng moved. He just stretched out his foot, but the next moment, he appeared behind a perfect middle-stage lone traveler. He stretched out his sparkling finger and gently pointed at the lone traveler who was already in a daze. In an instant, annihilation. Simple, it was too simple. Everything was so simple and ordinary. It was as if the one who was annihilated just now was an ant. Domineering, it was too domineering. Who had ever seen such a clean and direct annihilation without the slightest trace of smoke? Emperor Lu Feng. He is titled the Emperor of all emperors. His will is the will of the Emperor. Whoever he wants to die, that person will die. At this moment, Lu Feng was the incomparably terrifying, illusory figure of the great Emperor behind him. Under the contrast of the mysterious and ancient Futu, the illusory figure shone with a brilliant brilliance that had never been seen before. It was as if this was the pinnacle of all living beings in the universe. He was the strongest king who controlled the countless immortals, demons, and gods. All the land under the heavens belonged to the emperor. All the people on the shores of the land were the emperor's subjects. If the emperor wants the subjects to die, the subjects have no choice but to die. This was the will of the emperor. He wanted that lone traveler to die. Then he died just like that. Seeing this scene, everyone was completely awakened from their shock. At this moment, the 5 lone travelers who could move no longer had any thoughts. They did not even have the courage to stay for a moment, let alone resist. The image of Lu Feng as the emperor had been deeply rooted in the bottom of their hearts. They would never be able to resist or even face him. At this moment, the only thing they could think of was to run. No matter what, they had to run. However, could they really run away? Lu Feng's aura was slowly condensing. At the next moment, he looked at the direction where they were running and revealed an emotionless smile. This was the ridicule of the emperor. I am the emperor. The condensed exclusive technique was displayed by the illusory figure of the great emperor. It was the most complete and most powerful I am the emperor. When the illusory figure of the great emperor fused with this attack, it actually unleashed an attack that was invincible in the void. At this moment, space-time was annihilated. Although they were running in 5 different directions, Lu Feng did not chase after them, because there was no need for that. He only needed to unleash a single attack in the opposite direction, because at this moment, countless space-time cracks had appeared in the place in front of Lu Feng. They stretched for tens of thousands of miles. Wherever the power covered, everything would vanish like smoke. Chapter 3:12. Quietly standing in place, Lu Feng's smile was still cold and emotionless. It was as if everything that happened before had nothing to do with him. There was a slight commotion in his eyes. Finally, in the next moment, Lu Feng's gaze stopped. Endless nobility completely bloomed at this moment. The unparalleled majesty belonging to a king roared through the world at this moment. He gently stretched out his jade-like finger and gently pointed at the void. At this moment, the entire void shook endlessly again. This was the strength of a perfect stage warrior. Although it couldn't be compared to a demigod who had comprehended divine power, Lu Feng's strength was still unimaginable. Come out. I see you. Didn't you covet my existence? Then I've already come out and am already standing at the peak of my world. You still don't dare to come out. The world was empty, and not the slightest sound appeared. Everything was so quiet and strange. Zhou Yuan had already forgotten about his serious injuries. He just stared blankly at Lu Feng, and the people around him were the same. From an ordinary disciple to the #1 monster of the world, everything happened too fast, and they couldn't accept it. Only Li Kai's expression was still crazed. He knew that he had witnessed the appearance of a miracle. As a genius, he naturally understood what this kind of increase in battle strength meant. In the current Federation, to be able to increase 1 level was already an emperor, and to surpass 5 small levels meant that it was enough to enter the Massacre Abyss and obtain the title of Massacre Emperor. Back then, Godslayer Lu Tao's talent was unparalleled. He suppressed the billions of young geniuses of the universe at that time, and they couldn't even put up a slight resistance. But at that time, he had only crossed over 6 small levels. But now, Lu Feng had completed a magnificent feat. He directly went from the peak evolution stage to the advanced perfect stage. This kind of leap was 7 small levels. He even had the battle strength of a perfect stage expert. Although such a battle didn't have the slightest ripple, it was a world-shocking battle that made the entire universe's younger generation pale in comparison. 30 years ago, the Lu family's extreme Tao monster, Lu Tao, swept through the world and was invincible among the younger generation. And now, the sovereign personage's bloodline has appeared. It is even more terrifying and unimaginable. This is the strength of the #1 family in the universe, the Lu family, which has been silent for 4,000 years. Is this the signal that they want to revive? Li Kong murmured, but there was a strange light in his eyes. The Lu family was the human race. The Lu family had kept the human race in peace for 500 years, although very few people in the Federation knew about it. However, in this chaotic foreign battlefield, there was no one who didn't know about it. Therefore, the prosperity of the Lu family represented the prosperity of the human race. The Lu family's strength signified the arrival of the human race's era of rejuvenation and hegemony. After a long time, there was still no response. Lu Feng finally showed impatience on his face. If a king was enraged, millions of corpses would lie within 1,000 li. The wrath of an emperor would bring misery and suffering to all living beings within 10,000 miles. If an emperor was enraged, then endless time and space would exterminate everything. Lu Feng, the greatest emperor since ancient times, seemed to be enraged. He took a deep breath, and a powerful power began to gather. Zhou Yuan and the others knew that Lu Feng was about to use his extreme power. This was his true extreme power, a power that was different from the one he used to obliterate those ants. However, just as I Am the Emperor's strongest attack was about to be unleashed, a hearty laugh suddenly came from the direction Lu Feng was facing. During the battle in the Massacre Abyss, I originally thought that you, the Emperor, would continue to challenge those higher-ranked Emperors of Massacre and titled Emperors. However, I didn't expect you to actually give up and not participate in any battles. What a pity. What a pity that you had already left by the time I arrived. What a pity. The voice was hazy and drifting, as if it involved fate. It was impossible to feel or grasp it. Hearing this voice, Lu Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. He saw that in that area, time and space were distorted. Countless karma and fate were intertwined, as if they were being detained by some peerless existence. Finally, as the voice fell, a figure slowly walked out. Young, this was another incomparably young existence. Moreover, this wasn't the youth of an expert who had returned to the peak, but the youth of a true life journey. He was a monstrous genius, definitely a peerless genius at the peak, the Massacre Emperor, wearing a luxurious robe, with a purple gold sacred official on his head. He looked like a peerless prince of the immortal spirit imperial family. Every step he took was an acknowledgement of fate, a connection of karma. Such a performance couldn't shake Lu Feng in the slightest. The only thing that made Lu Feng feel strange was his appearance. In the universe, there was one form that was the most powerful. That was the appearance of the human race. Regardless of whether it was the war god race, the human race, the heavenly race, the Nether race, and many other peak Overlord races, although they still had many differences, in general, they were very similar to the human race. The stronger the race, the more obvious the degree of resemblance to the human race. In fact, the so-called human race was just a term used by the human race. Among the various peak races, they all believed that the strongest race form was their own race's appearance. However, this was just a saying passed down among ordinary people. For those peak existences that didn't care much, because they knew that regardless of whether it was the human race or the other races, they weren't similar to each other. If they were to say that they were similar, it was just that they were similar to a type of living being. That was the ruler of the primitive immortal devil era, the immortal devil. The immortal devil form was the final form. Regardless of whether it was the human race or the other peak races, they were all slowly evolving towards that form. It was also because of this that, generally, as long as they had a human form, their potential would be abnormally terrifying. If it wasn't for this, the rise of the human race wouldn't have been hindered so greatly, and they wouldn't have walked to the brink of extinction. The supreme prince in front of him seemed to be such an existence. However, when Lu Feng scanned him slightly, he realized that he didn't belong to any of the peak overlords. In an instant, Lu Feng had figured it out. He knew that the person before him should be someone from a first-rate race. However, Lu Feng didn't know which first-rate race he belonged to. A hint of caution appeared in Lu Feng's eyes as he looked at the supreme prince, who was entangled by fate and karma. This was because Lu Feng felt an immense threat coming from him. This was something he had never encountered before. He hadn't even felt this way when he'd faced the 5 great rulers in the massacre abyss. He knew that the prince before him was definitely an exceptional enemy. He might even be a quasi-supreme Tao freak who was about to become the king of massacre. Just as Lu Feng was pondering over this person's identity, a voice suddenly rang out behind him. It was a voice filled with endless shock and trembling. You are from the sacred race. You are the sacred race's holy son. Only the most distinguished existences could wear such attire. Since he was a member of the sacred race, he had to be the holy son. He was the #1 existence among the younger generation of the sacred race. The sacred race? Lu Feng suddenly thought of something. He cast his gaze on the supreme prince's forehead, and sure enough, he saw a kind of hazy and complicated rune. It was a kind of extremely strange and terrifying rune that was impossible to grasp at all. A hint of fear appeared in his eyes. Among the younger generation of the entire universe, there were many people whose strength far exceeded Lu Feng's. After all, he had only cultivated for a short period of time. However, there were only a handful of people who could make Lu Feng feel fear, and the sacred race's holy son was one of them. Of course, Lu Feng didn't know who this person was. What he was really afraid of was the sacred race. It made sense that Lu Feng hadn't recognized him before. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, the sacred race was too mysterious. In every generation, the number of members of the sacred race that appeared in the universe had never exceeded 10. Moreover, in the eyes of many existences, the sacred race couldn't be considered a race. To define a race, a population was necessary. At the very least, a population of 1 billion people was the minimum standard. As for the overlord races, there were trillions and trillions of them. However, it was rumored that the sacred race's population had never exceeded 1,000. Such a rare race should have been exterminated long ago. After all, there was no mercy in the universe. Moreover, the sacred race was a first-rate race in the current era. They were even the pinnacle of the first-rate races. The wealth they possessed was much more than any other first-rate race. With a population of less than 10,000 and a shocking amount of wealth, any race, even the overlord races, would be tempted and would want to plunder them. However, they had never been exterminated. In the current universe, the overlord races were most unwilling to provoke the sacred race. The reason for all this was because the sacred race was incomparably terrifying and powerful. In the sacred race, as long as they reached adulthood and their aptitude wasn't too bad, they would be at least a god-level existence. Of course, this wasn't the most important thing. After all, 1,000 god-level existences could be easily destroyed by any Overlord race or even first-rate race. However, the Sacred Race was different. This was because the Sacred Race was a race that was blessed by fate and could understand fate. Legend had it that due to the uniqueness of the Sacred Race, there were no primogenitors. However, there were many ancestor-level powerhouses. Every Sacred Race patriarch was an existence known as the Starlord. Although the Starlord wasn't the Divine King, they were still other path sovereigns. Moreover, the Sacred Race was very special. Their physical strength wasn't very strong. In the same realm, in terms of strength, they wouldn't be a match for any warrior. Even ordinary warriors were the same. However, the true strength of the Sacred Race wasn't this. They were a race that was protected by fate and karma. Any Sacred Race member could use the power of fate and karma. Once they used it, no one in the same realm would be a match for them. It was the same for psychics after god-level existences. Everyone understood that if the Sacred Race's population wasn't limited by the universe, they would be the #1 race in the universe. Of course, the Sacred Race's terror didn't lie in their powerful combat strength. The most terrifying thing about them was their ability to analyze fate, and this level of understanding was enough to change one's fate. Chapter 3:13. Think about it. If any race wanted to attack the Sacred Race, they would have to let the Sacred Race know about it. And once the Sacred Race became ruthless, it would be enough to change the fate of that race. It would cause the Sacred Race to decline in future eras. They would no longer be favored by fate and would eventually disappear from the stage of history. This kind of heaven-defying power to change fate could be said to be unsolvable. It terrified billions of races. Of course, it was also very difficult to change the fate of a race. Every time their destinies changed, they would suffer a backlash from the power of destiny. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, the Sacred Clan would never use such a method. Very few people in the universe had truly seen the Sacred Clan, but the legends of the Sacred Clan were incomparably clear to the experts of every race. It could be said that the Sacred Race was a very special existence. Although they were not a race, no one wanted to provoke them. Lu Feng looked at the Sacred Race's holy son, not understanding why he had come to find him. Lu Feng would never believe that they had met by chance. After all, the Sacred Race's holy son was extremely noble. Even if he wanted to train, it was impossible for him to be like these bandits. Therefore, the only possibility was that he had specifically come to find him. After all, the Sacred Race's analysis of fate and karma had reached an unprecedented level. It was not surprising that they could deduce that he was not dead, or even that they could deduce his location. Both parties were silent. When Li Kai said the words Sacred Race, time and space in this world seemed to have completely frozen. No one wanted to be the first to speak and break the silence. After a long time, Li Kai seemed to have thought of something. His face became even more horrified and distorted. He looked at the Supreme Holy Sun and stuttered, Could it be that you covet the Emperor's fate and want to come here to steal his fate power?" In an instant, Lu Feng's strength slowly recovered. The terrifying Futu and great Emperor phantoms behind him also showed signs of an ultimate sublimation. Lu Feng had originally felt that things were a little strange. Now that he heard Li Kai's words, he suddenly realized something. The Sacred Race was a powerful and mysterious race. No one could deny this. Their analysis of fate made them the most esteemed guests of any race, the supreme prophets of their race. However, that was not the case in reality. In the universe, all races were far more respectful than fearful of the saints. Apart from being able to defy the heavens and change one's fate, the biggest reason was that they could steal the power of other people's birth charts and transfer it to themselves. It was for this reason that every single member of the Sacred Race was an incomparably terrifying existence. Of course, The members of the Sacred Clan could only steal one fate in their lifetime. Even so, it was still terrifying enough. After all, if an ordinary member of the Sacred Clan were to steal the fate of a king of slaughter, they would have the potential to become a divine king. In addition to their understanding of fate, they would be almost invincible in this era. Therefore, the more peerless a genius was, the more they feared the sacred race. It could even be said that they would flee as far as they could from the sacred race. Due to this reason, the sacred race's reputation in the universe was terrible. The sacred race's Shengzi could only smile helplessly when he saw Lu Feng's imposing manner. He said slowly, "It seems like you are still too prejudiced against the sacred race. These were all false rumors. If we could steal fate so easily, the sacred race would have become the #1 race in the universe long ago." Upon hearing this, Lu Feng understood slightly. If that was really the case, any existence of a sacred race would probably be at the virtual king level. Moreover, although there were not many kings of slaughter in the universe, there were still quite a few of them. If the sacred race had really stolen a few, it was impossible that they had not produced a single supreme divine king after nurturing them. If you want to steal a person's fate, you'll have to suffer a backlash from fate. The more peerless an existence is, the more difficult it is to steal it. If you want to steal a king of slaughter's fate, I'm afraid only the sacred race's patriarch or Starlord would be able to do it at their peak. As for those even more unsolvable existences, after saying this, the sacred race chosen glanced at Lu Feng with a strange expression, his eyes filled with a strange taste. I'm afraid we can only do it by sacrificing the entire existence of our race. Moreover, there is no guarantee of success. Even if we succeed, the powerful backlash will instantly wipe us all out. Such an ability was too heaven-defying. It was limited by the laws of the universe. Moreover, if they succeeded, fate would also deprive them of their talent for fate. It could be said that what they stole was only the birth horoscopes, not the realm or talent. If they lost their talent for fate, then no matter how noble their fate was, they would be useless. Lu Feng fell silent. He knew that this was not wrong. After all, up until now, the sacred race had never produced a god king. However, the power behind Lu Feng and the terrifying phenomenon did not seem to have any intention of restraining themselves. Instead, it became even more terrifying. "Why did you come to find me?" Lu Feng could already see the sacred race's Shengzi's realm clearly. He was a martialist who was infinitely close to the mid-level upheaval transformation stage. Based on the sacred race's innate understanding of fate, even a high-level perfect stage martialist would not be a match for him. After all, the sacred race would produce 10 sacred race members in every era. Every sacred race member was definitely in existence that could be titled the king of massacre. The person before him was a sacred race Shengzi that had not appeared even once in dozens of generations. Therefore, he was most likely an extreme, monstrous genius. He was the king of massacre. The sacred race's sacred race, Shengzi smiled faintly and uttered 2 words softly. Challenge. He had come here to challenge himself. The birth of the sacred race's sacred race Shengzi was extremely difficult. In the past 30 generations, over 700 years, he was the only one who had become a sacred race Shengzi. Such a sacred race Shengzi should have been invincible in the current era. He should have enjoyed the status of the #1 monstrous genius of this era. However, things had changed. This was because a monstrous genius had appeared in this universe. It could even be said that he was an existence that surpassed monstrous geniuses. Everyone who had seen him in battle had said that he was an unparalleled existence that stood at the pinnacle of this era. He was an existence that had the potential to stand shoulder to shoulder with the era overlords or even the human monarchs. All the geniuses and monstrous geniuses had become a joke in the face of the emperor's name. They had all been reduced to subdued foils. How could he accept this? Therefore, after failing to find any traces of Lu Feng in the massacre abyss, he had finally returned to the sacred race and sought the help of the current Starlord. Finally, he had vaguely determined Lu Feng's possible location. It had already been more than 3 months since he came here. During this time, he had made use of his supreme power to set up a plan. Finally, today, he had seen Lu Feng descend. Lu Feng smiled faintly when he saw the sacred race, Shengzi's serious expression. It was a kind of supreme majesty, and there was a strange kind of joy in this smile, as if a supreme emperor was just joking with a subject. If you want to fight, then let's fight. A gift. The sacred race, Shengzi felt like this was a gift. This was a gift from a supreme emperor to his subject. His eyes glowed with fury. No matter how hard he tried to shake it off, this feeling of a gift still existed. This made him very uncomfortable. He was the sacred race Shengzi, an existence that stood at the pinnacle of the Massacre King. In the past 1,000 years, very few people had been able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. How could his pride be humiliated like this? How could his glory wither away like this? However, as if he had thought of something, the sacred race, Shengzi forcibly suppressed the boundless fury in his eyes. He said slowly, "Emperor, although your talent is exceptional and comparable to a human monarch's, your cultivation base is still too weak. Right now, your strength is still too low. The current you is no match for me. I also don't want to defeat you like this. Therefore, I will fight you on another level. I wonder if you dare." On another level? Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. However, he didn't hesitate or think about it. He smiled faintly and said with indescribable confidence, "As you wish, as you wish. Everything is up to you. I am the emperor. In my time and space, I'm the greatest existence. I am not the least bit afraid of any challenge, no matter what level of battle it is. As long as you want to fight, then I will fight." The sacred race, Shengzi, took a deep breath. "Before I came to find you, my father, the current Starlord, once said that your greatness is unparalleled throughout time. Being in the same era as you is destined to be a kind of sorrow, but also a kind of glory. The sacred race does have the power to seize other people's fate, but we disdain using that power. Perhaps you don't know this, but there is a rule in the sacred race. If anyone steals someone else's fate, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, regardless of how noble the stolen fate is, they will no longer be a member of the sacred race. Our nobility comes from the depths of our fate and is recognized by the universe. The nobility of your so-called bloodline inheritance is simply incomparable to ours. Since my father said that your fate is supreme since ancient times, then let's fight. Then, let's have a battle of fate. Let's see if your fate is more powerful, or if it is the strongest fate in the sacred race. A battle of fate. Lu Feng had never heard of such a battle before. It wasn't just him. Other than the sacred race, very few other races knew about it. If the sacred race's holy son only wanted to compete with him in terms of strength, then although Lu Feng was arrogant, he would still have a 50% chance of winning. However, if it was a battle of life and death, Lu Feng wasn't afraid in the slightest. Fate was an existence that surpassed bloodlines. The nobility of bloodlines was enough to illuminate the past and present, and the nobility of fate could even transcend epochs. However, Lu Feng had a noble fate that even his fate had to acknowledge. He wasn't a fate bestowed upon him, but the admiration of fate. Everything had to be passively acknowledged. How could he be afraid in the slightest? Lu Feng smiled indifferently, still looking as if he was bestowing a gift. Compared to others, the sacred race's holy son, who understood fate, was more aware of Lu Feng's terror and the suppression Lu Feng gave him. However, he wouldn't admit defeat. He couldn't admit defeat, and he didn't want to admit defeat. This was because his fate was also incomparably noble. He was an existence that stood at the pinnacle of the sacred race's countless eras. His father, the sacred race's Starlord, had once said that he was the only peerless existence in the history of the sacred race who had a chance of breaking the shackles and becoming the supreme divine king. Chapter 314. Therefore, he wanted to fight. No matter what he faced, he wanted to achieve the strongest victory. After taking a deep breath, the sacred race's chosen took out an unknown crystal and slowly crushed it. In the next moment, the two seemed to disappear from the world. There was an endless silence, as if an eternity had passed. However, Zhou Yuan and the others knew that not even a minute had passed. Finally, after they had forgotten everything, at the place where the two had disappeared, a hazy feeling washed over them. In the next moment, two silhouettes slowly appeared. Their appearances were completely different from when they disappeared. The sacred race, chosen from before, was high-spirited and had the aura of a king looking down on the heavens. But the current him was incomparably defeated. There was still a look of disbelief in his eyes. His entire body hadn't changed in the slightest from before he had left. However, the feeling he gave off was completely different. He seemed to have lost. Moreover, he had lost without the slightest emotion. He had been completely suppressed. Li Kai had already heard it. He knew that the two were going to engage in a confrontation on a different level. They were going to compete in birth providence. The sacred race was recognized as the race with the highest birth providence in the universe. Even the emperor race couldn't compare. But only at this moment did they realize that the person with the highest birth providence in the sacred race had been defeated. He had lost without the slightest emotion in front of the number one monster in the world. He slowly lifted his head and quietly looked at Lu Feng. There was an exceptionally complicated look in his eyes. It was indescribable. He finally opened his mouth to speak. "You mean everything. How could it be like this? My birth providence was bestowed by the heavens. It was given by fate. But why can't I even put up the most basic resistance in front of you? I can't even put up the slightest resistance. If it was a battle, even if he was completely suppressed, he wouldn't feel the slightest bit dispirited." However, at this moment, Lu Feng was completely suppressing him in the domain that he was most proud of, the domain that he believed to be unparalleled in the world. In fact, it was a kind of crushing suppression. How could he accept this? How could he bear this? Hearing this, Lu Feng was still smiling. However, he had already dispersed the supreme majesty of an emperor. He seemed to have returned to being the ordinary and harmless Lu Feng. "Your birth providence was bestowed by fate and is incomparably noble. But my birth providence has to be acknowledged by fate. I don't need any bestowment because I am above everything." Lu Feng didn't have the domineering aura of an unrivaled ruler, but his words revealed a supreme and supreme will. After sensing all this, the sacred race's chosen sighed deeply. The sorrow providence in his eyes slowly. Yes, such a great fate was not something that could be bestowed by anything at all. He had always been bestowed by fate. Although he belonged to the highest position, when faced with an existence that could stand on equal footing with fate, and even fate had to concede and acknowledge, what qualifications did he have to resist? In a daze, the sacred race's chosen seemed to recall everything that had happened when he'd entered the birth providence battlefield. His birth providence was the supreme azure dragon, a supreme birth providence that belonged to the supremes of the immortal demon era. Legend had it that 9 dragons were supreme beings that could become supreme emperors. The ancient records of the sacred race were incomparable to those of other races. Even the monarch races that had passed through several epochs couldn't be compared. Therefore, he knew a lot of things that even the divine king didn't know. The azure dragon birth providence was one of them. Legend had it that if one obtained one of the 9 azure dragons, one would become an unparalleled overlord of the immortal demon era. If one could obtain all of them, they would have a supreme possibility of becoming the supremes of the 9 azure dragons. Even the epic overlords of the immortal devil era had only managed to gather 9 dragons. His birth providence was the azure dragon birth providence. Although it was only one dragon, it didn't mean that he had no potential. After all, people with the Azure Dragon Birth Providence were born with 9 Supremes. However, they would constantly awaken due to special opportunities. When the Flood Dragon soaring abyss broke free from the bindings of the Azure Parasol, it would transform into a true dragon of the 9 heavens. This true dragon of the 9 heavens was the Azure Dragon Birth Providence. He had originally thought that it would take a long time for him to awaken a second Azure Dragon Birth Providence. He might not even be able to awaken it in his entire life. However, what he couldn't imagine was that he had awakened a second Azure Dragon Birth Providence in the battle just now. Perhaps that battle couldn't even be considered a battle. This was simply unheard of and incomprehensible. The battle just now couldn't even be considered battle. This was because when he saw the Emperor Birth Providence that surpassed everything, he simply didn't have the ability to resist. He could vaguely see that there wasn't just an Azure Dragon around the Emperor. There were also incarnations of Supremes that were on par with the Azure Dragon. They were actually floating quietly, as if they were the guards of a Supreme Emperor. This was simply incomparable. Therefore, the instant he saw Lu Feng's Emperor Birth Providence, he immediately failed. It was a complete failure that hadn't even started the battle. The corners of the sacred race's holy son's mouth curled into an indescribable bitterness as he slowly said, "Emperor, I never thought that challenging you this time would end up like this. I once made a solemn vow. Although I might have expected to fail, I definitely didn't expect that I would fail so thoroughly. I didn't even have the chance to resist before I completely submitted. And my second Azure Dragon Birth Providence was actually awakened because I knelt before you. The awakening of the Providence. This was the awakening of the Providence. The moment he saw the Emperor Birth Providence, he couldn't control his own Birth Providence and began to worship it with the utmost sincerity. His Birth Providence didn't weaken. The Azure Dragon Birth Providence was still the mountain-like Azure Dragon Birth Providence. However, Lu Feng's Emperor Birth Providence was comparable to the great Birth Providence of an entire world. In the face of this Birth Providence, he couldn't control anything. He could only worship it with the most basic sincerity and helplessness. However, because of this helplessness, he had awakened a second Azure Dragon Birth Providence that he thought he would never be able to awaken in his entire life. Moreover, this wasn't even the deepest change. He seemed to vaguely feel the change in his Birth Providence. It was as if this worship had bestowed upon him a change that allowed him to awaken on his own. Therefore, he felt very helpless and sorrowful. When he heard the sacred race's holy son's helpless and sorrowful words, Lu Feng finally wiped the smile off his face. He sighed softly and slowly said in an unusually serious manner, "Do you believe in fate?" The sacred race's holy son was stunned. Fate? The sacred race was a race favored by fate. Their strength came from fate. So how could they not believe in fate? There was no answer, but Lu Feng already knew what his answer would be. What followed was a deep sigh. Yes, your strength was bestowed by fate. Therefore, how could you not believe in fate? But is fate really right? Do you really want to accept fate's arrangements and sink into its manipulation forever? Sink into the manipulation of fate. The sacred race was a race of fate. They were a noble race bestowed by fate. They had never doubted this point. However, when he heard Lu Feng's words, he was jolted awake. Yes, they were a race bestowed by fate, but weren't they also a race manipulated by fate? As if he hadn't seen the sacred race's holy son's expression, Lu Feng's voice slowly lowered. I used to believe in fate too. Moreover, I have always believed in fate. However, one day I understood and began to doubt. Doubt everything. In a daze, Lu Feng seemed to recall the first time he had seen Tong Tianfutu. Before that, he had been a good-for-nothing. His bloodline had been sealed since birth, and he had been unable to cultivate anything. Faced with such a seal, Lu Tao, his father, the God-Slayer, had been helpless. The Lu family's grand ancestor had been helpless. Even the legendary primogenitor, the supreme existence of the heretic path, hadn't been able to do anything. Perhaps his life had been decided by fate, just like that. He had to slowly accept reality and learn a skill to be independent. Otherwise, he would have spent his entire life idling away with his parents' high salary. However, he had changed. The moment Tontian Fudu had appeared in his mind, he had changed. Since then, he had begun to transform. It was a complete and crazy transformation. His path defied the heavens, and even more so. Finally, after going through life and death, he had reached his current realm. This was a realm where the human race was willing to fight for him, and where hundreds of millions of races would remember his name. I seem to have heard a sentence before. However, who said it, or when, I can't remember. I remember that he said, "Lamentable, lamentable. You have done so much and thought you understood everything. However, you don't know that you are just an ant. You have always been miserably toyed with by fate." I have forgotten who said that, but I am certain that he was an incomparably great existence. He was a great existence who could break the cycle of reincarnation and change time and space. However, in the end, he still failed. He said, "You have always been miserably toyed with by fate." I don't know who he is. However, to be praised by that great existence, he must be an incomparably great existence. However, such a great existence is still being toyed with by fate. He is still being manipulated by fate. Is this what we want? No matter how strong we are, in the end, we will still be toyed with by fate. Tell me yes. No. His final voice carried a roar that made people tremble. It was difficult to describe the shock in their hearts. The sacred race's holy son raised his head and looked at Lu Feng in confusion. He had once been high-spirited and had vowed to become the greatest existence of this era. However, today, when he had wanted to prove himself, he had been dealt a series of blows. Even his own beliefs had been shaken. This had made him lose his mind. He had become muddle-headed and didn't know what to do. Chapter 315. Lu Feng's eyes were filled with a dazzling radiance. He seemed to want to wake up the sacred son of primal chaos, but he also seemed to want to explain to himself. His voice was endlessly distant, carrying an inexplicable arrogance and an incomprehensible persistence. Don't you understand? Don't you know? As a member of the sacred race, the sacred son of this race, favored by fate, as the one with the most noble fate in the history of the sacred race, don't you know? Then I will tell you. Lu Feng will tell you. He took a deep breath, incomparably firm, unprecedented persistence, and a kind of extreme madness. Fate F***CK fate. My own fate, my own path. Only I can arrange it and control it. I don't care what fate or bestowal you have. My fate, vast and mighty, billions of laws, endless paths. Only I can control it. A frightening awakening, a complete awakening. At this moment, the sacred son of the sacred race stared blankly at Lu Feng. Gradually, his eyes became brighter and brighter, crazier and crazier. Yes, I don't care what fate or bestowal you have. My fate, vast and mighty, billions of laws, endless paths. Only I can control it. The sacred race, favored by fate. Even peak overlords don't dare to provoke us. However, that is not our own glory. All of this is bestowed upon us by fate. We are just a sad race controlled by fate. Why can't we give birth to the divine king? Why can't we multiply and expand? Everything is arranged by fate. Since fate wants to control us, why should we respect it? Why should we worship it? Ha ha, ha ha. Endless crazy laughter, as if he had forgotten his own identity and the restraint he should have. At this moment, the sacred son of the sacred race was like a madman, standing on the spot and laughing crazily. Lu Feng gradually fell silent. His words were said to the sacred son of the sacred race, but how could they not be said to himself? Looking at the sacred son of the sacred race laughing crazily and gradually crying, Lu Feng smiled. He knew that the sacred son of the sacred race had understood. He finally understood what fate was. He finally saw his own path. Everything was enough. After a long time, the crazed look on his face gradually disappeared. On her tear-stained face, there was an incomparably relaxed smile. After being freed from the shackles, the sacred races chosen seemed to have been reborn and entered a new life. He looked at Lu Feng and actually slowly knelt down. The holy son of the holy race, Jiahua Wuyue, greets the holy lord, holy master, holy race, sovereign. This time, it was Lu Feng's turn to be stunned. He looked at the sacred child in front of him, Jiahua Wuyue. He didn't know why he would suddenly go crazy and kneel before him. As if seeing Lu Feng's confusion, Jiahua Wuyue smiled faintly. With an inexplicable sense of conviction, he slowly said, "Sacred Master, you are the master of our sacred race." This is the conclusion we've reached after countless eras. Countless ancestors and all of the Star Lords worked together, and finally, in this era, not too long ago, we were able to divine your arrival and appearance. That's why I came here. I refuse to accept you. Why should the last hope of our sacred race be entrusted to you? Why can you lead our sacred race to glory and become a true race? But now, I understand that you are really the sacred master. You are the one we've been waiting for. You are the one who can lead us out of the confusion of fate. Jiahua Wuyue had already been informed of Lu Feng's identity before he left the sacred race. However, he refused to accept this. Why would a foreign race member become their sacred master and lead them out of all the mysteries? He, Jiahua Wuyue, was the most outstanding existence in the history of the sacred race. Only he was qualified. Therefore, he came here and used the power of fate to manipulate the chaos in this area. Finally, they succeeded in intercepting Lu Feng. He didn't make a move because he wanted to see what kind of person this person, who was recognized by many ancestors and his father, the current Star Lord, was. Then, Lu Feng's shocking outburst made him tremble. However, he still refused to accept this. Therefore, a battle of fates had occurred. He had been mercilessly suppressed by Lu Feng and could only accept it sadly. He couldn't even resist. However, he still refused to accept this. All this could only prove Lu Feng's potential and his strength. How could he lead the sacred race if he was only strong? He still didn't have the qualifications. However, after Lu Feng said those words, all his doubts and dissatisfaction instantly vanished. Just a few simple words had made him understand the sorrow of the sacred race. He had finally found the way forward for the sacred race. Therefore, he was willing to acknowledge the existence of Lu Feng, the sacred master of the sacred race. Lu Feng didn't turn his head. His gaze shifted slightly. It was as if he was looking into an endless distance. There was an incomparably complicated look in his eyes. I vaguely remember that a lot of things were arranged by you. You allowed me to meet and obtain. Are you trying to prove that you have always controlled me? However, I refuse to accept this. I, Lu Feng, will always be Lu Feng. No one can change me. Let me advance according to your wishes. One day, I will prove myself. I will definitely prove myself. A group of people sat on a brand new spaceship. However, the owner of this spaceship wasn't theirs. It was Jiahua Wuyue's spaceship. No one knew where he had gotten it from. However, based on Lu Feng's understanding of Jiahua Wuyue, the origin of this spaceship was definitely not clean. We're almost there. We can finally hand over the mission smoothly. The journey this time was truly thrilling and exciting. As they sat on the spaceship and looked at Qinglan City, which was about to arrive, all sorts of emotions welled up in their hearts. Although they had known that danger might appear when they passed through that area, they had never imagined that it would actually be this frightening. However, the journey this time was simply a mythical experience for everyone. After all, in their eyes, Lu Feng was a moving miracle. Li Kai sighed silently as he watched Lu Feng, who was sitting there calmly like an ordinary person. However, in the blink of an eye, a look of worship appeared on his face. In the beginning, when he had found out that Lu Feng was a grade 3 alchemist, he had wanted to recruit Lu Feng for his family. However, when he had found out that Lu Feng had a family, he had finally given up on that idea. In his opinion, being able to be on good terms with Lu Feng was also a good thing. However, He had never imagined that Lu Feng's identity would actually be so terrifying and honorable. His heaven-defying nature was even more unexplainable. Li Kai believed that he would probably never have such a journey in his life again. However, this time was already enough. Young Master Lu, I wonder where you plan to go after handing over the goods this time? Li Kai hesitated for a moment before asking. When they had almost arrived, Lu Feng had already decided that he would leave after handing over the goods. He had also told them about it. Therefore, Li Kai wanted to know where Lu Feng was going. After hesitating for a moment, Lu Feng said slowly, "Originally, my initial plan was to hurry back to the Federation. After all, it was the safest there. However, after staying here for a while, I realized that I can't leave so soon." As he spoke, Lu Feng glanced at the young master of the sacred tribe, Jihua Wuyue, who had no image at all. As if he had felt Lu Feng's gaze, Jihua Wuyue suddenly sat up straight and said solemnly, "Young master, don't worry. The news this time is definitely true. I can really guarantee that as long as you don't take the initiative, your identity won't be exposed." Lu Feng nodded gently. After all, that piece of news was very attractive to him right now. Therefore, Lu Feng had decided to stay here for the time being. Moreover, with the sacred race chosen around, Lu Feng wouldn't have to worry about being recognized. After all, the sacred race's concealment skills were very famous in the entire universe. Looking at Li Kai, and then at Zhou Yuan, Cha Mo, and Li Kong, who were slowly recovering, Lu Feng smiled and said, "This time, I'll have to ask my brothers and sisters to help me keep this a secret. After all, it's not time for me to appear yet." The few of them nodded their heads firmly. After witnessing Lu Feng's terrifying strength, they understood the importance of Lu Feng even more. If people knew that such a person wasn't dead and was even in the chaotic outer region battlefield, even the virtual king of the Overlord races, the Void Emperor, would appear and personally kill Lu Feng. Whether it was from a personal point of view or from a race's point of view, they couldn't reveal the secret that Lu Feng was still alive. Seeing their attitude, Lu Feng also smiled and thanked them a few times. "Actually, young Master Lu, you don't have to worry. Our lives were saved by you this time. Even if you don't say anything, we know what to do." Although the root of the problem was that the sacred race young master wanted to find trouble with Lu Feng had saved them, and that couldn't be erased. Therefore, these people were very grateful to Lu Feng. When Jihua Wuyue saw this scene, he only shrugged his shoulders slightly. In his opinion, the safest thing was that only dead people wouldn't say anything. Lu Feng's importance was far from what these insignificant ants of the human race could compare to. If they could die for the sacred master, it would be their glory. However, it was obvious that Lu Feng had no intention of doing so. As a subordinate, he naturally couldn't say anything about it. Chapter 316. Lu Feng, who seemed to understand Jihua Wuyue's thoughts, turned to Jihua Wuyue and said slowly, "Wuyue, since you have decided to follow me, you should pay attention to what you should. This time, I have to hide my identity. Otherwise, if someone finds out, I'm afraid that no one will be able to save us, unless it's the Divine King. If an expert descended and wanted to kill Lu Feng, then Jihua Wuyue, who was with Lu Feng, would definitely be killed as well. After all, Lu Feng's death would cause a huge commotion. One could tell by looking at the attitude of the human race. Compared to Lu Feng, killing Jihua Wuyue was nothing. After all, most existences had the same thoughts as Jihua Wuyue. In their opinion, only the dead could keep secrets. Jihua Wuyue had guaranteed this countless times. He had followed Lu Feng this time because he was truly convinced and wanted to complete the task his father had given him. However, he also had his own selfish motives. Jihua Wuyue understood that, although he felt that his Azure Dragon birth chart could continue to awaken, the awakening was inseparable from this sacred master. Only by following him could he become even stronger. After all, the source of the sacred race's strength was their birth chart. As he looked at Jihua Wuyue, Lu Feng felt that he wasn't very reliable. After interacting with him for a day, he already understood what kind of character the sacred race's Shengzi was. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a devil incarnate. This could be seen from the chaos the entire region had created in order to search for him. Therefore, Lu Feng still had a certain degree of skepticism towards his words. When he saw Lu Feng's expression, Jiahua Weiyue understood what this sacred master was thinking. At this moment, his face darkened slightly. My dear young sacred master Lu, although I may be a little unreliable occasionally, this is a very serious matter. Although I may be a little unreliable, such situations are extremely rare. As he said that, he stretched out his finger and twirled it gently to indicate how small this was. In most cases, I am very steady, yes. He's very steady. After saying this, he nodded his head vigorously, as if what he said was true. The suspicion in Lu Feng's eyes didn't recede, but he didn't question it anymore. Moonless, our lives are at stake this time. No matter how unreliable you usually are, you must be serious this time. Jiahua Weiyue lightly nodded his head with an indifferent expression. A black line flashed across Lu Feng's face as he looked at Jiahua Weiyue, who was solemnly making a vow a moment ago, and then acting like this in the next moment. Finally, the flying ship successfully arrived. With a slight jolt, all the propulsion systems of the spaceship were shut down. At the same time, the cabin door opened. All right, young Master Lu, we've arrived at Qinglan City. This time, should we exchange directly or wait for a while? Lu Feng pondered for a moment and said, let's go directly. This time, I still have some things to do. I don't want to waste too much time. On the spaceship, Lu Feng really didn't want to waste too much time after hearing the news that Jiahua Weiyue had brought him. Therefore, what he wanted now was to quickly obtain the 20 million divine object points and enter the time realm to cultivate and become a telekinesis grandmaster. Only then would he be able to participate in that grand event. Therefore, Lu Feng was determined to obtain the 20 million divine object points. At this thought, Lu Feng looked at Jiahua Weiyue, who had changed his clothes and looked even more lazy and rascally. He sighed helplessly. The young master of the sacred tribe had an extremely honorable status and was considered a peak existence in the entire universe. Originally, Lu Feng had planned to lend him some divine object points. However, who would have thought that the sacred son would be so poor? However, Lu Feng could understand the situation. Although Jiahua Weiyue had robbed many powerhouses, their divine object point were bound to their identity cards. As long as they refused to trade, there was nothing Jiahua Weiyue could do. Back then, he had come here to challenge Lu Feng. Therefore, he didn't even look at the divine object points or the items that could be exchanged for divine object points. As a result, he was now as penniless as Lu Feng. Ever since Lu Feng had revealed his identity, he had become the absolute core and leader of this team. They didn't question Lu Feng's words. Then let's go directly to the trading center. My friend is there. He's in charge of the settlement of this mission. The group nodded and headed towards the transaction center under Zhou Yuan's lead. Qinglan City was the largest city in the Qinglan region. It was dozens of times larger than the 37th city that Lu Feng had been to before. It could be said that this was a truly bustling area. Lu Feng felt that Qinglan City was several times larger than the heavenly planet on the capital administrative planet he had been to before. Of course, this was a foreign region battlefield after all. Various major races coexisted here, so the degree of prosperity was naturally much greater. If they were to walk slowly, they might not even be able to reach it in a few days. Fortunately, they were warriors. Once they opened up their speed, they were many times faster than any hover car. Zhou Yuan had been seriously injured, but with the help of some medicines from Jiahua Weiyue and the others, he had recovered a little. It wasn't a problem for them to travel quickly. Even so, it took them a full 3 hours to finally reach the trading center. Seeing people coming and going and countless races entering and leaving the trading center, Lu Feng sighed slightly. Compared to city number 37, this place is much, much more prosperous. The flow of people entering here was definitely dozens or even hundreds of times more than the 37th city. After all, the truly large missions were issued here, so there were many more people here. Zhou Yuan smiled and said, "Young Master Lu, although the Qinglan region isn't considered a large region, due to its special location, the experts gathered here are considered to be at the forefront of the entire Wind God territory. Although the number of experts here is still a certain distance away from those truly apex large regions. Compared to those cities of the same level, it is really much stronger." Lu Feng nodded slightly. His heart was slightly stirred as he looked at the foreign race experts entering and leaving. Almost all of them were warriors. Lu Feng even saw a few perfect stage warriors among them. It should be said that perfect stage warriors were already considered extremely noble existences on the first-grade life planets of the human race. Such terrifying martial artists were almost always the guardians of the various large families. But here, they were like mortals, entering and exiting. Judging from the attitude of the people around them, they seemed to be used to it and didn't feel anything strange. But Jiahua Wuyue pursed his lips slightly. Previously, he was infinitely close to the intermediate upheaval transformation stage. And now, after awakening the second Azure Dragon Life Providence, his strength had advanced to the next level, almost reaching the strength of the high-level upheaval period. With his strength, he could most likely easily suppress a peak perfect stage warrior. It could be said that with Lu Feng's help, no existence could threaten Jiahua Wuyue unless it was a demigod. Of course, after his strength had improved, he no longer had any thoughts about Lu Feng, not even the thought of challenging him. This was because the stronger he became, the more he felt the terror of Lu Feng. He was a member of the sacred race, and he relied on the power of destiny to challenge those of a higher level. But Lu Feng was a terrifying existence that even destiny was forced to acknowledge. Once his power of destiny was unleashed on Lu Feng, he would be completely suppressed. He might even suffer a terrifying backlash. It could be said that if he wanted to fight against Lu Feng, he could only rely on his intermediate upheaval transformation stage strength. And with this strength, Lu Feng probably didn't even need to use the power of his bloodline to easily suppress him. Secretly glancing at Lu Feng, Jiahua Wuyue secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Lu Feng was the natural nemesis of the sacred race. Others couldn't wait to avoid the sacred race. But Lu Feng was taking on the saint race with ease. Fortunately, he is the sacred lord of the sacred race. Okay, let's go in and hand over the mission earlier so that we can finish earlier. Lu Feng took the lead and walked into the hall. Soon after, Jiahua Wuyue and the others entered one after another. There were even more experts in the hall. Many of them were gathered in twos and threes, as if discussing something. They weren't interested in the appearance of Lu Feng and the others. But some human experts nodded slightly when they saw them. In the foreign battlefield, if there wasn't hatred between the same race, they would still get along very well. Lu Feng also nodded in response. By this time, Zhou Yuan had already left and was heading to the counter to find his friend to hand over the goods. Lu Feng and the others quietly stood where they were, waiting for Zhou Yuan's return. The handover this time was very simple, so they didn't want to waste any extra time here. Soon, Zhou Yuan returned to the hall from the transaction window. Seeing the smile on his face, Lu Feng knew that the matter had been settled. Sure enough, Zhou Yuan walked up to Lu Feng and waved the identity card in his hand. Futu, the divine object point for this mission is here. Give me your ID card, and I'll give you your share. When there was no one else, they called Lu Feng Young Master Lu, but when there were many people, they called Lu Feng Futu. This was set by Lu Feng. After all, in the foreign battlefield, the surname Lu was already considered a taboo, and Lu Feng didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble, so he set such a saying. Naturally, these people wouldn't go against him. He handed his identity card to Zhou Yuan, and after he swiped it gently, everything was done. Okay, Big Brother Zhou, I have to leave. When I have time, I'll look for you. Also, help me apologize to Big Brother Su. If I have the chance, I'll personally apologize to him. Lu Feng wasn't a procrastinator. Since he had already decided everything, he didn't want to waste any more meaningless time. So, after everything was done, he had to leave. Obviously, Zhou Yuan and the others had some complicated feelings towards Lu Feng. Although following Lu Feng made them feel a great deal of pressure, they still had to follow him. But to be able to be with the young master of the Lu family, the universe's #1 monster, was a great honor. But now that Lu Feng said he was leaving, they naturally wouldn't stop him. After hesitating for a moment, Zhou Yuan's face hardened a little. He gritted his teeth and said, Lu, Futu, I know your potential, but in the foreign battlefield, you have to keep a low profile. What you see and come into contact with is only the existence of a domain. You may be invincible in this domain, but once you enter the vaster sky, then let alone demigods, I'm afraid that even gods and true gods will frequently appear. So, you must be careful, and don't be too careless. Such a statement was undoubtedly preaching. If other young lords heard this, even if they weren't angry, they would definitely feel uncomfortable in their hearts. But Lu Feng didn't have such a thing. He nodded his head gently, his eyes filled with calmness. Thank you, Big Brother Zhou. This time, I will try to keep a low profile. After all, everything about me is in the future. I don't want to die so early. Seeing Lu Feng's sincere expression, Zhou Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. If he hadn't been in contact with Lu Feng and knew what kind of person Lu Feng was, he probably wouldn't have said such words. Okay, I won't say anything else. In short, you must pay attention to your safety. After saying this, Zhou Yuan turned around and was about to leave. Seeing his departing figure, Lu Feng hesitated for a moment, but still shouted, Big Brother Zhou, if there's anything you can't solve, you can find me. If you can't find me, you can go to my family. You should know where it is. Chapter 317. Zhou Yuan nodded without turning his head. The human king star of the human clan was known to every human being, and even to the alien races. It could be said to be a sacred land. Finally, Zhou Yuan, Li Kong, Li Kai, and Chai Mo completely disappeared from Lu Feng's sight. Seeing that Lu Feng still hadn't left, Jia Huayue pursed his lips and said, Sacred. Futu, these feelings are the fetters on your future path. If you want to set foot on the supreme peak, it's best to give up these meaningless feelings. Otherwise, there will be too much karma in the future and it will affect your supreme path. Jia Huayue was the #1 genius in the history of the sacred race. Although his analysis of fate and karma couldn't be compared to the sacred race patriarchs, he was still at the pinnacle of the current universe. He naturally knew the fetters these things had on an expert. However, when he heard this, Lu Feng smiled indifferently. His path to the pinnacle was different from others. What he wanted wasn't to give up, but to protect. He wanted to protect his family, his lover, his friends, and his clansmen. Lu Feng felt that if he really gave up on these things, then the so-called pinnacle wouldn't be worth it. Of course, he couldn't say these words. After all, Jia Huayue's environment and growth were different from Lu Feng's. Even if Lu Feng said it, he wouldn't understand. Lu Feng glanced at Jia Huayue and said, Let's go. After speaking, he took the first step out of the trading hall. Jia Huayue shrugged as he watched Lu Feng's departing figure and followed him out. The realm of time wasn't something that could be found anywhere. It was impossible for an ordinary city to have one. Only in the central cities of powerful regions would there be such a realm of time. Fortunately, although the Qinglan region wasn't a large region, it was destined to be prosperous due to its special geographical location. Therefore, there was a realm of time here. According to the instructions on the identification card, the two of them spent half a day before finally arriving in front of a magnificent loft. The architectural style of this pavilion was different from that of any other race. However, its volume was extremely terrifying. It was probably comparable to a 1,000-story-tall building in the human race. Lu Feng raised his head to look at the ceiling, which he could barely see, and felt a little strange. To be honest, if Lu Feng hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have known that there was such a building and such a place in this world. It seems that I made the right choice this time by not returning directly. If he went back directly, then perhaps he would be safe, but he would definitely not have such vast knowledge. In the early stages, aptitude might be enough to decide everything. However, once a cultivator reached the later stages of cultivation, the so-called aptitude alone would no longer be enough to support him in breaking through to a higher realm. Willpower, soul, and even knowledge, all of these were indispensable. Only by possessing all of them could one truly have the qualifications to break through to a higher realm. Lu Feng also knew that once he reached a certain level, the human race would definitely release him to increase his knowledge. However, in that case, he would always be in a state of protection. It was simply impossible for him to truly come into contact with everything and experience life and death. Furthermore, I am cultivating the great demon true body. If I lack the experience of life and death, then it will simply be impossible for me to break through. Therefore, I can't return so early this time. After all, this kind of opportunity is really hard to come by. Lu Feng had already made a decision. If it wasn't necessary, he would continue to stay here until he felt that he could leave. Lu Feng's dazed expression clearly stunned Jiahua Wuyue. However, he just shrugged slightly and didn't say anything. Finally, when Lu Feng came back to his senses, he calmly said, "Let's go." Jiahua Wuyue followed Lu Feng in. This pavilion didn't have a special name. This was the realm of time. There weren't many people inside. After all, if one wanted to cultivate in a twofold time acceleration for a month, they would need at least 1 million divine item points. 1 million divine item points with a lifetime savings of many evolutionary stage martialists. Therefore, very few people came here. They could be counted on one's fingers. The arrival of Lu Feng and Jiahua Wuyue attracted the attention of many people. However, these people didn't pay too much attention to them. In their opinion, Lu Feng should be a young master of a large family. This was the only explanation that could explain why they had come here. Lu Feng walked to the front of the counter, looked at the receptionist in front of him, and said with a faint smile, "I want to enter the realm of time to cultivate for a month. How can I go about this?" The receptionist was a young lady from the feather race. The feather race was a second-rate race in the universe. However, every member of the feather race was extremely handsome. It could be said that their appearances completely matched the aesthetic standards of the peak overlords. Therefore, many places were filled with members of the feather race. The young lady from the feather race smiled when she heard that Lu Feng wanted to enter the realm of time. "Mister, which cultivation realm do you want to enter?" As she spoke, she took out a device from her side. Lu Feng answered without any hesitation, 6 times faster. "Cultivate for a month." When she heard the words 6 times, the young lady's hand, which was holding the device, paused slightly. She almost dropped the device in her hand. However, she quickly recovered. Although she tried her best to pretend to be indifferent, the shock in her eyes still let Lu Feng see the shock in her heart. "Sir, did you say 6 times?" There was no doubt that it would be very impolite to ask again. However, this young lady couldn't afford to be rude now. This was because what he said was really shocking. 6 times the speed of the realm of time represented an extremely terrifying expenditure. Although 1 month was the minimum standard, it was still not enough. However, the expenditure was as high as 16 million divine item points. 16 million divine item points was almost the lifetime savings of an ordinary perfect stage martial artist. After all, not every martial artist in the upheaval stage had the same net worth as a perfect stage martial artist. Generally, those who came here would choose 2 times the acceleration. Some wealthy martial artists would choose 3 times the acceleration. As for perfect stage martial artists, the most they could do was 3 times the acceleration. There were very few who could choose 4 times the acceleration. As for 5 times the acceleration, there were only a few in a year. As for Lu Feng's 6 times the acceleration, there would only be 1 in a few years. Lu Feng looked at the young lady from the feather race gloomily. He didn't know why she was so shocked that she even said it out loud. However, Lu Feng's personality was very gentle. He didn't blame the young lady. He just nodded affirmatively. At this moment, the young lady from the feather race finally realized that she had lost her composure. She hurriedly apologized to Lu Feng and started the device in a slight panic. After everything was done, she asked for Lu Feng's identification card. She checked it into a card slot and swiped it slightly. Suddenly, with a ding, everything was done. Sir, as the 6 times acceleration has not been used for a long time, the divine item filling it has been taken out. We will arrange for someone to fill it in. Please go to the VIP room and wait for a while. The 6 times acceleration could only be used once in a few years. It had been a long time since then. Therefore, the divine items that were used to maintain the realm of time and accelerate time have been taken out to avoid meaningless waste. Lu Feng was a little speechless. However, this was the truth. He couldn't do anything about it. He could only helplessly walk back to the VIP room with Jihua Wuyue, who had a strange expression on his face. Seeing Lu Feng's nonchalant expression, Jihua Wuyue was a little confused. He understood that even he had seen through it. It was impossible for the peerless Holy Master not to see through it. Therefore, Jihua Wuyue still spoke. Holy Master, could it be that you really didn't see through it? When they heard that the chick had revealed a 6-fold time acceleration, their excited expressions. Lu Feng's footsteps didn't stop at all. His expression was the same as usual. He didn't turn back. He didn't even move. Just when Jihua Wuyue thought that Lu Feng didn't hear it, Lu Feng's calm voice slowly traveled over. I saw it. However, what about it? Jihua Wuyue was a little stunned. He looked at Lu Feng's back that had already walked a few steps away. He suddenly smiled slowly and said to himself, yes, so what? What they know, they know. Even if they have some ideas, so what? If they really dare to come, then I'll just kill them. He was now comparable to the peak of the perfect stage. This Holy Master's strength was also at the peak of the perfect stage. He was almost invincible. Moreover, the two of them were the inheritors of the 2 great races. They had countless gifts from their elders. Not to mention that it was just these few people. Even if the gods descended, they wouldn't be able to do anything to them. Therefore, even if these people had some ideas, what could they do? He quickened his pace and finally caught up to Lu Feng. In the VIP room, the 2 of them sat there quietly. Besides them, there was no one else here. Just as Jihua Wuyue was feeling bored, the silent Lu Feng suddenly spoke. Wuyue, now that we have time, tell me about the sacred race. After all, you call me Holy Master, but I don't even know about the sacred race. Isn't this a little too funny? Lu Feng was also very interested in this mysterious race. After all, the sacred race was one of the most mysterious races in the universe. Because of the power of destiny, they were the race that the various peak overlords didn't want to provoke the most. Jihua Wuyue was silent for a moment. A hazy divine light appeared in his eyes. He seemed to be using some kind of secret technique. After a moment, he finally returned to his original appearance. He looked at Lu Feng and smiled apologetically. Holy Master, I was using a secret technique of the sacred race just now to see if anyone was monitoring this place. Hearing this, Lu Feng knew that there wasn't anyone around. Otherwise, Jihua Wuyue wouldn't have dared to call him Holy Master. Actually, the matter about the sacred race is really simple. However, it's also very complicated. We are the only 3 races in the universe that have experienced several eras of inheritance. The other races, including the human race, have all reappeared in this era. Perhaps you have appeared before the age of eternity and left behind a spark of life. However, after the great calamity of the universe, your ancestors from the previous age of eternity were completely wiped out. Although you belong to the same race as them in this age of eternity, in essence, there is no longer any connection between you. However, we are different. The sacred race has experienced countless eras, but we still pass down our inheritance in the most ancient way. Hearing this, Lu Feng was silent for a moment. However, there was a look of shock in his eyes. Chapter 3:18. The great calamity of the universe was a terrifying calamity that could destroy an epic civilization. Even an epic overlord would perish during such a calamity. However, the sacred race had avoided countless calamities and passed down their inheritance using the most ancient method. How terrifying were they? I'm afraid your strength is already comparable to any pinnacle overlord race. After going through countless eras, the number of divine items and resources left behind would definitely shock any race. Jiahua Yue smiled proudly when he heard Lu Feng's words. Indeed, the sacred race's strength isn't inferior to any pinnacle overlord race. Of course, this refers to the enormous amount of resources we have. After all, the sacred race has never had more than 1,000 people. Compared to the wars of the pinnacle overlord races, which often involve hundreds of billions of people, we are simply too lacking. Therefore, although we have sufficient strength, we won't easily participate in any battles or seek allies. Population had always been the most fundamental shackle of the sacred race's development. It could be said that in terms of peak combat strength, the sacred race was already sufficient to become a true pinnacle overlord race. However, they only had experts. Their population was too small, and they simply couldn't withstand any expenditure. It was also for this reason that they were ultimately only a first-rate race. Of course, if we don't do anything, the other races won't dare do anything to us. After all, only the most terrifying pinnacle overlord races like the human race and the emperor race can deal with us. The other races don't have the strength to exterminate us. This sentence wasn't wrong. In the past, Lu Feng might not have believed it. However, he now understood that Jiahua Yue wasn't exaggerating at all. A race with less than 1,000 people possessed resources comparable to any pinnacle overlord race. If they weren't strong enough, they would have been exterminated long ago. The sacred race is a race favored by fate. We were born close to fate and have the power to control fate. By relying on this understanding of fate, we can avoid many disasters and obtain many unexpected protections. In fact, we are often the victors in confrontations. This is because we are a race favored by fate. Our nobility originates from the depths of our fate. Unlike the inheritance of a bloodline, the inheritance of a fate chart was even more extreme. Not only could it pass down one's strength, but it could also pass down one's insights. It is for this reason that once the children of the sacred clan reach adulthood, they will definitely become god-level existences. The inheritance of a birth chart. Lu Feng had also heard of this before. After condensing a supreme divine body, one could then carry out the bloodline inheritance. Moreover, the bloodline contained a great amount of power. Bloodline inheritance allowed the next generation to use this unparalleled power. Regardless of whether it was the supreme divine body, the sacred truth body, or the divine king's eternal imperial body, they were all passed down through the bloodline. Besides bloodline inheritances, there was an even more terrifying inheritance, and it was the inheritance of fate charts. The birth chart inheritance was also the legendary soul inheritance. What they inherited was not only power, but also the understanding of life providences. Life providence inheritance was terrifying, but it was extremely difficult to carry out life providence inheritance. This was not something that could be done with strength alone. If it really depended on strength, then the Lu family would already be a life providence inheritance. After all, in terms of strength alone, the human monarch looked down on the endless eras. Only the supreme terror of the primordial immortal fiend era, whose existence was unknown, could be compared. The most basic condition for a life providence inheritance was to survive the great calamity of a universe at the end of an era. Only then could one's soul transform, engrave the mark of an era, and become a true life providence inheritance. The sacred clan was a life providence inheritance, so they were naturally incomparably powerful. Sacred Master, there are many things about the sacred clan that I can't explain and don't know. After all, I don't have much authority in the sacred clan right now. Therefore, When you have time to come to the sacred clan, everything will be clear. After confirming Lu Feng's identity as the sacred master, Jihua Wuyue had invited Lu Feng to the sacred clan several times. However, Lu Feng did not agree. At the very least, Lu Feng would not go to that mysterious clan before he felt that he was strong enough. This time, after Jihua sent out another invitation, Lu Feng only smiled slightly and still did not agree. After a short silence, Lu Feng suddenly asked, Wuyue, you said that in this era, besides the sacred clan, there are two other clans that also have life providence inheritances. In that case, who are they? Lu Feng only knew about the life providence inheritances of the sacred clan. He really did not know about the others. Now that he heard Jihua Wuyue mention it, he naturally had to ask properly. This time, Jihua Wuyue was silent. He was extremely silent. Upon seeing this scene, Lu Feng was slightly confused. However, Jihua Wuyue spoke again soon. However, this time, his expression was incomparably solemn. Sacred Master, besides you, there are only 3 clans in the universe that know about the life providence inheritances of the sacred clan in this era. There aren't many left. Without exception, none of them are true pinnacle figures. Even so, they only know about the sacred clan. Besides us, no one else knows about the existence of the other 2 clans. This is the covenant we made. We once agreed that no matter what, we would not tell anyone about them. Lu Feng nodded his head gently. After all, the life providence inheritances represented not only exceptional talent, but also terrifying wealth that had lasted for countless eras. Once people found out, it was very likely that a war would spread throughout the universe. Therefore, it was reasonable not to say anything. Upon seeing Lu Feng's indifferent expression, Jihua Wuyue felt a little depressed. He had said so much just to make Lu Feng feel depressed. However, who would have thought that the Sacred Master would not be interested in all this? This made Jihua Wuyue feel very uncomfortable. Jihua Wuyue sighed slightly when he thought about the advice his father, the current Star Lord, had given him before he left. However, you are not an outsider, Sacred Master. My father also told me before I left. No matter what you ask, as long as I know, I will tell you. Therefore, it is not a big deal to tell you. This time, Lu Feng was slightly stunned. In his mind, the Sacred Master's role was similar to that of a spiritual teacher. In the Sacred Clan, the symbolic meaning was more than the actual meaning. However, it seemed that things were not like that. Jihua Wuyue looked at Lu Feng and said slowly, Actually, young master, the other 2 clans with life providence inheritances are no longer independent clans. They have already fused with other clans. Besides the noblest bloodline, which is still carrying out life providence inheritances, the other clans have been completely assimilated. Lu Feng was stunned for a moment before he nodded his head gently. In that case, they are. Jihua Wuyue smiled faintly. You also know about the other 2 clans with life providence inheritances. The 2 clans they have fused with are currently the 2 greatest clans in the universe. Lu Feng's expression froze slightly as he said slowly, the Human Clan and the Monarch Clan. Currently, there were many peak Overlord clans. However, it was universally acknowledged that only the Human Clan and the Monarch Clan were the true peak clans. They were the peak clans that surpassed the other peak Overlords. The Monarch Clan's position was indisputable. Not long after the beginning of this era, they became the #1 race in the world. If not for the Human King and the Divine King, the Monarch Clan's position would have been maintained forever. As for the Human Clan, they were even more terrifying. In a short 10,000 years, the human race had given birth to a total of 15 supreme Divine Kings. Among them, there was even the first Divine King, the Overlord of an era, and the Human King, the supreme existence that was comparable to the primordial immortal devil era. In addition to them, there were also the Divine King of Chaos, the Divine King of Yellow Springs, the Divine King of Emperor, etc., and the Supreme of Time and the Second Divine King mythological Forbidden Domain. It could be said that the glory of the human clan was incomparable to that of any other clans. Even the monarch clan was inferior to the human clan. In the past 500 years, the human clan had been coveted by many peak clans because the divine king had not been born. However, 300 years ago, the new peak overlord clan, the demon king, was defeated by the human Lu family's heretic supreme. After that, the human clan fell from the ranks of the peak clans. No one dared to look down on the human clan anymore. A few months ago, the human clan gave birth to 4 heretic supreme beings. This made the human clan's reputation soar again. They almost had the momentum to return to the #1 race in the universe. Everyone understood that as long as the human clan gave birth to a true supreme divine king, the title of the #1 race would belong to the human clan again. Therefore, the 2 most powerful peak overlord clans in the universe were undoubtedly the human clan and the monarch clan. Jiahua Wuyue smiled and nodded lightly. He did not speak, as if waiting for Lu Feng to answer. Now, after so many reminders, Lu Feng had vaguely guessed something. The life chart inheritance clan you mentioned, among the monarch clans, is it the Deshur Tian bloodline that has the support of the #1 monarch clan? The Deshur Tian bloodline was recognized as the #1 aristocratic family in the universe before the rise of the human king Lu family. Unlike the Lu family, who only relied on the human king's bloodline to be domineering, the Deshur Tian bloodline could be said to have a long history. In almost every era, there was a supreme divine king overseeing it. They were worthy of being the #1 monarch clan. They were also recognized as the #2 aristocratic family in the universe after the Lu family. Jiahua Wiyue nodded lightly. It was normal to be able to guess the Deshur Tian bloodline. After all, the Deshur Tian bloodline was too famous. Moreover, once the direct descendants of the family reached adulthood, almost all of them had heaven-defying strength. The characteristics of the linked life chart inheritance, so Lu Feng should be able to easily guess it. However, the life chart race of the human clan was not so easy to guess. Sure enough, Lu Feng fell into deep speculation. A very long time passed. Lu Feng's eyes showed a hint of confusion, as if he had fallen into some kind of barrier. After a long time, he sighed deeply, looked at Jiahua Wuyue, and asked, "Is it the Yuyo clan or the Tai Huang clan?" The Yuyo clan was the #2 aristocratic family of the human clan. It was the bloodline family of the emperor and the divine king. It was the only aristocratic family in the Federation that could compete with the Lu family on the surface. Legend had it that before the emperor and the divine king, the Yuyo clan was an extremely powerful aristocratic family. Although it was not the #1 aristocratic family of the human clan at that time, it was still in the top 3. As for the Tai Huang clan, it was even more ancient and mysterious. Legend had it that they were the #1 aristocratic family that appeared after the rise of the first divine king. Before the appearance of the Lu family and the rise of the Yuyo clan, they were the #1 aristocratic family of the human clan. The history of the Tai Huang clan was also incomparably glorious. It was even more glorious than the Lu family and the Yuyo clan. One of the peerless divine kings of the human clan, the divine king, came from the Tai Huang clan. Besides the divine king, the Tai Huang heavenly emperor, one of the 3 great heavenly emperors, also came from the Tai Huang clan. The only ones Lu Feng could think of were these 2 aristocratic families. As for the Lu family, before the birth of the human king, the Lu family did not exist, so it could not be the Lu family. Sure enough, Jiahua Wuyue nodded gently. It's the Tai Huang clan. Chapter 319. As expected, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a bright light. According to his analysis, the most likely candidate was the Supreme Imperial family. After all, this family was recognized as the most mysterious family in the human race. Every family head was called Supreme Imperial. Once they were titled as Divine King, they would be Divine King Supreme. And if they became a celestial emperor, they would be the supreme celestial emperor. This was the same as the divine king D. Shur Tion's bloodline. Jehu said slowly, "The three great birth chart inheritances in the universe are either clans or families. They are Jehua of our sacred race, D. Shur Tion of the monarch race, and the supreme imperial of the human race. The only difference is that we are still independent, but they have chosen to integrate." At this point, Jehua Wiyue revealed a bitter expression. "Once, when they made such a decision, our Jehua bloodline tried our best to stop them. After all, marrying and integrating with a bloodline race is an insult to the nobility of a birth chart race. But now it seemed that we were wrong. It's been 100 million years. This era's civilization has been born for 100 million years. The first to leave was D. Shur Tion. They successfully entered the monarch race and eventually became the #1 family in the world. In every generation, a divine king was born. The second to leave was Supreme Imperial. 10,000 years ago, they finally chose the human race, which had just risen. Because of the short time, although they couldn't compare to D. Shur Tion, they still gave birth to a divine king, a celestial emperor. On the other hand, we, Jehua, were the most powerful existence among the three great birth chart races, but we were never able to give birth to a divine king or a celestial emperor. Although every generation Starlord is an alien supreme, we have never been powerful or glorious. Therefore, the ones who failed were actually us. Once the most powerful bloodline among the three great birth chart races, it had now become the most pitiful bloodline. This kind of sarcasm was indescribably striking. Lu Feng was silent, because it was really difficult for him to speak about such things. After a long time, Jehua Wuyue finally woke up from his memories and regret. He looked at Lu Feng apologetically and said solemnly, "But it's different now, because you have appeared. Because of our Jiahua's uniqueness, it's impossible for us to be like Sakura and Tai Huang, casually choosing a race to fuse with. Fortunately, our ancestors had already planned for this day. They constantly used their lives to analyze fate, and in the end, they still calculated your appearance. We have always believed that the appearance of the Holy Lord will lead our saint race to break through the shackles of fate and walk towards the road of revival." After waiting for a while, the Feather Girl came in and informed Lu Feng that he could enter the Time Realm. Lu Feng stood up and left with the Harpy Girl. Jiahua Wiyue, who was bored to death, could only sit there calmly. To him, the Time Realm didn't matter at all. After all, if he wanted to increase his strength, relying solely on cultivation was very, very slow. Only by increasing their life providence could their strength increase at a terrifying rate. Therefore, the realm of time was of little help to him. Furthermore, even if he wanted to enter, he couldn't. If he revealed his identity, he would definitely be able to enter for free. He could even enter the Time Realm for an indefinite period of time to cultivate. Unfortunately, he couldn't and didn't dare reveal his identity. Although many races were wary of the sacred race, especially the pinnacle overlords, there were still many existences in this universe who weren't afraid of death. They were all lawless people. As long as there were enough benefits, they would even dare to kill someone of the Lu family's bloodline. Jiahua was obviously enough to attract these pinnacle existences to make a move. Therefore, Jiahua Wiyue could only wait in boredom, not daring to reveal his identity. On the first day Lu Feng left, he was indeed very calm. However, after 2 or 3 days, Jiahua Wiyue finally couldn't sit still anymore. He was innately very active. To put it nicely, he was very motivated. However, to put it bluntly, he was lawless. It was precisely because he had turned the sacred race upside down that his father, the current Star Lord, had sent him away. A strange light flashed in Jehua Wiyue's eyes as he looked at the strange gazes of the foreign race experts who were looking at the VIP room evasively. Anyway, it's boring here. I might as well use this time to do something. No matter what, this is to reduce the sacred Lord's troubles. This is a good thing, a good thing. He muttered a few words softly as if trying to find a sufficient reason for himself. Finally, Jiahua left the VIP room and headed outside. Behind him, many alien race experts also stood up and left with Jiahua. Jiahua didn't hide his cultivation. He was different from Lu Feng. Lu Feng was a Dao initiate. If one's cultivation level wasn't high enough, they wouldn't be able to see his strength. However, Jiahua had the power of destiny. Although he couldn't hide it as well as Lu Feng, the average demigod wouldn't be able to see through it. Therefore, unless he deliberately revealed it, the alien race experts present wouldn't be able to see through it. Therefore, this time, Jiahua did it on purpose. After entering the time realm, Lu Feng did not hesitate. He directly entered the divine planes in his sea of consciousness. Cultivating to the great success stage of the soul fusion realm in a month wasn't something that could be done by relying on self-cultivation alone. What he needed was to wholeheartedly immerse himself in cultivation. Within the divine plane in his sea of consciousness, Lu Feng's spiritual body grew larger and larger. The runes covering his body grew brighter and brighter. They flickered endlessly as if they were real. As Lu Feng continued to unleash countless complex and profound techniques, he continued to cultivate himself. Next, the rate at which his soul was expanding began to rise at a rapid rate. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. In the blink of an eye, the 6th month finally arrived. At this moment, the spiritual body's eyes abruptly opened. At this moment, the spiritual body was incomparably huge. It was like a giant that walked out from ancient times. With a wave of its hand, it easily stirred up all the power of the divine plain star ocean. A slight tremor could cause monstrous waves. Final step, great success. As a roar that shook the world came from his mouth, Lu Feng's huge and burly figure that almost reached the sky completely disappeared in the next instant. However, at this moment, the divine plain star ocean seemed to have been summoned by something. It actually started to churn endlessly. The entire star ocean was boiling. Countless waves seemed to want to devour everything and destroy everything. This scene lasted for a long time. When everything reached its peak and the divine plain star ocean was about to shatter, everything came to an abrupt stop. There wasn't the slightest bit of turbulence. The divine plain star ocean was calm. No more waves appeared. No more turbulence was born. Everything was peaceful. It was as if nothing had happened. After a long time, a figure slowly appeared above the calm divine plain star ocean. It was an ordinary-looking yet incomparably gorgeous body. It was ordinary because he felt incomparably calm, but he was gorgeous because of the endless runes that surrounded him. This figure was none other than Lu Feng. Yet at that moment, he had returned to his normal size. However, the feeling Lu Feng gave off this time was completely different. In the past, he and the divine plain star ocean were two separate existences. Lu Feng's spiritual body stood above the divine plain star ocean as a spectator. Yet at that moment, he had become one with the divine essence star ocean. It was as if he was the divine plain star ocean, and the divine plain star ocean was him. His eyes slowly opened. They were ordinary, but they shone with a sharp light that made people tremble in fear. Soul, fusion realm, great success. I've finally broken through my realm. I become a great psyche master. This time, my psyche master realm and warrior realm are completely equal. The first time they were equal was when he had just started cultivating. At that time, he had condensed the divine plane and the primordial body, so it was easy for him to reach the initial realm. However, as time passed, and as the number of battles increased, Lu Feng's warrior realm far surpassed his psyche master realm. Yet now, after the accumulation of time, he had finally made the two powers equal again. They had reached the same realm. Just as I thought, when the two realms were equal and I entered the soul fusion realm, the strange power increased again. Previously it was 1, 2 times. As he entered the advanced psyche master realm, the increase reached 1, 3 times. Yet now Lu Feng could feel it. His current buff had reached at least 1 for times of terror. Moreover, the equalization of the two realms allowed Lu Feng to have a new understanding of the use of the strange power. In the past, he could only use it to increase his strength. Yet now, Lu Feng could feel that he could truly use this strange power and make it his own means of fighting. A 1.4 times boost has made me even more unimaginably powerful in the realm of a peak evolution stage martial artist. At this time, my mind power has finally reached the level I'm looking forward to. The level of Lu Feng's anticipation was not just a few times or dozens of times that of other realms. What he wanted was limitless. Limitless mind power, limitless strange power. This meant that Lu Feng could finally use that strange power at the last critical moment. At this moment, Lu Feng's mind power was truly limitless in the Psyche Master realm. It was something that no Psyche Master could compare to. It was nothing more than imagination. I can finally use those supreme immortal techniques quickly and unscrupulously. Relying on that power, it will be a terrifying boost to my battle prowess. Although the 4 great immortal techniques were all low-grade existences, under the urging of Lu Feng's seemingly limitless mind power, they could finally display their strongest powers. Chapter 320. The power of any kind of immortal technique was enough to severely injure or even kill an ordinary high-level warrior in the upheaval phase. And the most powerful Qing Ming Tian, under Lu Feng's full activation, already had the power of Little Tian. Once it was used violently, it was definitely equivalent to the strongest attack of a beginner perfect phase warrior. Although it wouldn't be of much help when he fought against a peak perfect phase warrior, it was still very terrifying when used at a critical moment. Moreover, the number of times Lu Feng could use the blue firmament sky was based on his spiritual force. Lu Feng's spiritual force was limitless, so the number of times he could use the blue firmament sky was theoretically limitless. A complete green firmament sky was equivalent to the strongest attack of an early-stage perfect phase martial artist. What about 10 or 100 times? Once the number reached a certain level, the quantitative change could lead to a qualitative change. After all, the strongest attack of a beginner perfect phase warrior was something that even a middle perfect phase warrior would fear. And after being attacked many times, there was even the possibility of being seriously injured. Although I'm still unable to enter the forbidden mythological domain of combat power, I can rely on these blessings and means to suppress even an ordinary warrior at the peak of the perfect phase. Lu Feng already knew of the existence of the forbidden mythological domain. Of course, this was what Jiahua Wuyue had told him. Lu Feng knew that one day he would definitely be able to enter this domain, but definitely not now. After all, his accumulation was still too weak. All right, a month's time is up. It's time to go out. According to Wu Yue, the event should be starting soon. Before I go, I have to find an alchemist center to verify my rank. After learning that Lu Feng was also an alchemist, Jiahua Wuyue had told Lu Feng a piece of news. Of course, he had also heard this news. Calculating the time, in about 1.5 months, an alchemist grand event would be held in this foreign battlefield. This was a grand event that was held once in 100 years in the alchemist world. The purpose was to promote exchanges and mutual learning among alchemists. It could be said that even the alchemists who weren't present in the foreign battlefields would all rush over for this grand event. At that time, the number of alchemists that would appear would definitely be incomparably terrifying. And Lu Feng naturally wouldn't miss such a grand event. Although he had the Alchemy Sutra, he was much stronger than those people in many aspects. However, Lu Feng also knew that his accumulation was too little. If he were to build a cart behind closed doors, who knew how long it would take for him to reach the peak of this realm? Therefore, he had to attend the Grand Alchemist Gathering. Slowly pushing open the giant door made of ancient materials, Lu Feng walked out of the realm of time, accelerated by 6 times. Looking at the deserted surroundings, Lu Feng was expressionless. Sir, you've come out. He walked toward the hall in the same direction he came from. The feather girl was still in front of the reception desk. When she saw Lu Feng, she walked up to him enthusiastically. Lu Feng smiled faintly and asked, "It's time to cultivate, so I came out. May I know where my friend is? I'm leaving, so I wanted to ask him to leave with me." The feather girl originally had a warm expression, but when she heard Lu Feng ask about Jiahua Wuyue, her expression froze slightly. She said with a slightly strange expression, "Sir, your friend left after you left, and he hasn't returned yet." Lu Feng nodded gently, but didn't say anything else. Although he hadn't spent much time with Jiahua Wuyue, he knew the temperament of the sacred race's sacred son. It was simply impossible for him to sit here peacefully for a month. Therefore, his departure was within Lu Feng's expectations. Lu Feng wasn't worried about Jiahua Wuyue. After all, he knew fate. If he encountered any life-threatening situation, he would definitely avoid it. Besides, ordinary existences couldn't do anything to him. With his help, he had awakened the second Azure Dragon fate. His strength was comparable to any peak perfect stage martialist. And in Green Mist City, a peak perfect stage martialist was already considered the limit. Of course, Lu Feng also understood that as a large region near the front of the Wind God territory, there would definitely be demigods or even gods overseeing it. However, they wouldn't be able to threaten Jiahua Wuyue. After all, Jiahua Wuyue's identity was the current sacred race's sacred son. To be able to oversee this place, one had to have some status. They definitely couldn't, and wouldn't dare kill Jiahua Wuyue so easily. Besides, even if they really went crazy, they probably wouldn't be able to kill Jiahua Wuyue. With this thought in mind, Lu Feng turned around to leave. As she watched Lu Feng leave, the feather girl hesitated for a moment before calling out to Lu Feng. She always felt a sense of affinity towards Lu Feng from the bottom of her heart. Besides, Lu Feng wasn't like those young masters of large family clans who were naturally arrogant. Therefore, in the feather girl's eyes, Lu Feng was a very good genius. It was also because of this that she had temporarily forgotten her own identity and wanted to remind Lu Feng. "Sir, when your friend left, many foreign race martialists left together with him. There were even perfect stage martialists among them. Therefore your friend might." The feather girl didn't finish her sentence, but her meaning was very clear. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled warmly. "Thank you for your reminder. I know all this. However, those pieces of trash will always be trash." After saying this, Lu Feng glanced coldly at the foreign race martialists who were pretending to be chatting. Then, he turned around and walked out without looking back. Seeing Lu Feng leave, the feather girl was speechless for a long time. In the end, she could only sigh deeply and return to her position to continue working. Seeing Lu Feng leave, many foreign race martialists got up one after another. When Jiahua Wuyue left, they didn't leave, because they knew that Lu Feng was the big fish. Naturally, they would wait for the big fish to appear. Therefore, those who left with Jiahua Wuyue were the weaklings who knew they couldn't win. The true experts had all stayed here. Soon, more than half of the people in the hall disappeared. Seeing this, the feather race girl could only pray that Lu Feng would be able to escape. Walking out of the ancient pavilion, Lu Feng paused for a moment. He took out his identification card and connected to Jiahua Wuyue's signal. After a long time, Jiahua Wuyue's voice came from the other side. "Sacred Lord, you've come out of seclusion." Faintly, Lu Feng could still hear screams of agony. Of course, these screams didn't belong to Jiahua Wuyue. At this moment, Lu Feng's expression darkened slightly. "What are you doing, Wuyue? We still have things to do. We have to leave quickly." Hearing Lu Feng's urging, the other side didn't speak for a long time. Only after a long time did a rumbling sound come from the other side. "Ah, Sacred Lord, I'm busy with a life and death battle here. It'll be over in a while. It'll be over in a while. You must wait for me for a while." The moment the voice landed, another huge rumbling sound came. Lu Feng's expression darkened even more. He simply took out his identification card and walked out of the city. Although he didn't know where Jiahua Wuyue went, The huge rumbling sound coming from outside the city allowed Lu Feng to guess Jia Hua Wuyue's location. Lu Feng slowly walked over. However, each step was a mysterious condensation. His speed had already reached a frightening level. This was Cloud Mist Steps. Today, Lu Feng used Cloud Mist Steps for the first time. It was the large success stage Cloud Mist Steps. The expressions of the powerhouses following behind changed drastically. This speed shocked them. Furthermore, judging by the young man's appearance, they knew that he hadn't used his full strength yet. Even if he hadn't used his full strength, his speed had still reached such a frightening level. Then his strength. Many of the foreign race powerhouses exchanged glances and saw the hesitation and shock in each other's eyes. However, when they thought of the boundless wealth that could be brought, they finally clenched their teeth and forcefully gathered their strength to chase after Lu Feng. In this foreign battlefield, if one wanted to survive, then one needed to be powerful. And if one wanted to be powerful, then one needed to have sufficient resources. Therefore, in order to obtain resources, they had already forgotten about life and death and madly chased after Lu Feng with all their might. This was the first time Lu Feng had truly used Cloud Mist Steps. His heart was also slightly shaken. This supreme immortal technique was completely worthy of being called an immortal technique. Although this speed couldn't compare to his speed when he used his full strength, it was incomparable in a small area. Furthermore, he was currently only a telekinesis grandmaster. As for a warrior, once he used his full strength, he would already be at the high level of the perfect stage. The difference between the two was too great. Even so, his speed was still terrifying to such an extent. This made Lu Feng look forward to the immortal technique that would appear in the future even more. Soon, countless buildings were left behind by him. His speed had reached an extreme level. The foreign race powerhouses had already let go of everything and used all their strength to chase after Lu Feng. They didn't care whether they were exposed or not. As long as they left Green Mist City, it didn't matter to them at all. Furthermore, they were all perfect stage powerhouses. Although they weren't considered the peak existences in Green Mist City, they were still the strongest group of people. Once they joined forces, no one would dare to provoke them. Therefore, they simply didn't have the slightest scruple. He chose the shortest path and chased after Lu Feng quickly. Along the way, he crushed all the buildings that were in his way. After 30 minutes, Lu Feng had traversed a distance of thousands of miles and arrived outside the city. Lu Feng heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the terrain had been completely changed and the countless corpses on the ground. He had already expected such an outcome. After all, Jehoiu's strength was there for all to see. Only a demigod could defeat him. The strongest person among these people was only a mid-level perfect stage powerhouse. This kind of strength was simply a joke to Jehoiu. However, the tragedy of the scene still made Lu Feng feel a little strange. Of course, this wasn't because he wasn't used to it. In his 9 lifetimes, he had a powerful army that had slaughtered thousands of people without stopping. More than 10,000 people had died under his warhorse. One had to know that at that time, he had truly been on horseback. That kind of massacre was far from comparable to this kind of massacre. Lu Feng stood still, and the foreign race powerhouses behind him did the same. Everything outside the city made them take a deep breath. At this moment, their eyes were filled with incomparable shock. In their opinion, the people who had chased after Jehoiu should have succeeded a long time ago. After all, nearly a month had passed. How could they have failed to deal with a mid-level upheaval stage powerhouse? However, it seemed like everything wasn't so. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.